What's up, wrestling fans? Welcome to another episode of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast. Main event of the week here. We're going to get into another Mount Rushmore. So I'm excited to do that. We're going to talk about Money in the Bank. We're going to talk about a good list of about 20 plus people. Run down these superstars and do the usual thing we do here with the Mount Rushmore. So we'll tell you how that all works in a moment. First things first, just to introduce who we are. If you don't know, if you're brand new to the channel, I am Tony Mango. And I'm joined by my usuals, Robert DeFelice.
Howdy, everybody. Today we'll be talking about Mr. Kennedy. That's exciting.
And Callum Wiggins.
More like the Mountie in the bank.
Yes.
We're going to get into the Mountie? He never won this.
He should have.
Back in the day, actually, we did that whole thing. If you want to check out some extra stuff on the Darkcast, Rob and I, just in the middle of, I don't know, it was like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or something, we were like, hey, who would have probably won some of these in the past? So you go back in time, you try to figure out who would have cashed in at WrestleMania 1, that kind of thing. That's up on Patreon.
Say, we did not put the Mountie.
The Mountie did not get one of our spots. No, that's disappointing. But that's over on the Patreon, so check that out if you're interested in it. It's one of the Darkcasts. All you have to do is donate to the Darkcast here. It's also up on the members-only side of YouTube. Again, all you got to do is just sign up for that, and then you'll get access to that. It's a great way to support us as well, help keep the lights on here, help keep us motivated, and if you want to make sure that we do any kind of topic in particular, you can take advantage of the Pick Your Poison tier while you're over there. But if you don't got the spare change to do that, or to donate through the applause button, or to pick up some merchandise on TeePublic or Redbubble, there's other ways for you to help us out. Before we get into the whole discussion about the Money in the Bank thing, let me just run those down real quick to remind everybody to check if you are subscribed on YouTube, just in case you might be getting the recommendations and not subscribe because there's some kind of glitches and stuff. So subscribe if you haven't done that already. Ring the little notification bell as well. That way you know when we go live on certain things, when things get uploaded, because we don't have like a set at 3 o'clock on this day is when this gets uploaded. It's kind of willy-nilly, whatever it is. Willy-nilly is related to Little Nelly and, all the other things that go with the James Bond podcast we do over on Fanboys, which you should obviously check out, fanboysanonymous.com. Subscribe to everything over there. Follow, whether it's Fanboys or Smark Moment. Follow the Facebook and the Twitter accounts, and drop your comments below. Hit the like button, the share button. The way that these things work. YouTube's been around long enough. If you don't know how YouTube is, I don't know what to tell you. It's kind of like describing to somebody when you say, I'm going to Google it, and then you go, well, what does that mean? It's like, all right, well, what rock are you living under, Dwayne? But
no, I imagine that person's well-to-do, so they wouldn't need to know what Google is.
What, they just shout something into the atmosphere and somebody does it for them?
Yeah, because money. I mean,
Yeah. They've got money in the bank.
They do.
So yeah, how this works as far as Mount Rushmore itself goes is we are going to have a spirited debate here. We're gonna, unless we all agree on something, and then if we were like, I think this one, and then we go, yep, and that's the end of it. That'll be kind of a lackluster discussion, but it usually isn't the case. We are going to run down the different people, men and women, who have won the Money in the Bank, and we're going to try to figure out the 4 representatives that would best represent the Money in the Bank. As far as right now, we know that in a couple of weeks, we're going to get another Mr. Money in the Bank and Ms. Money in the Bank, maybe some repeat people, maybe people that are be for the first time ever. And of course, we don't know who's going to win, so we can't talk about their great reign or their terrible reign or whatever it might be. But we do know the ones leading up to 2021. And there are anywhere between 1 to 4, I think, people per year. 3 people at the very least. I know in 2010 we got 3, for instance, and there's been some times where people have lost briefcase and stuff. Actually, it might be 3 might be the limit. I'm looking at that right now. We got 3 in 2017. We got 3 in 2020. We got a lot of options here. And there's a couple repeats, so we're going to clarify, if we're talking one year or the other one. There's no set determining factor of who can get picked as well. Some might argue, the one they cashed in is the most important. Some might say it's the journey until the cash in. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's how they won the Money in the Bank briefcase. Maybe it's whether or not they cashed in successfully is what matters, more so than how they cashed in or anything that goes along with that. So we're just going to kind of run through the list here, and we're going to try to figure out who the top 4 are. And, we invite you to do the same thing. So drop a comment below and tell us where you end up placing on this list. So normally we don't have a full, we can go one by one with a lot of these things. When we talk about, I think the last Mount Rushmore that we did was Mount Rushmore of entrances, which is just, hey, spit a name out there and we'll talk about it kind of thing. I think we should go year by year for this, just to give ourselves a little bit of, direction. And if you're starting off with 2005 with Edge, the first Mr. Money in the Bank. He won it at WrestleMania 21, held it for 280 days, cashed in eventually at New Year's Revolution, and capitalized on John Cena in the Elimination Chamber to do the smartest thing you can possibly do with Money in the Bank, and that's what earned him the Ultimate Opportunist nickname, where he took the opportunity and awakened John Cena at that point. Especially at that point, he's at the top of his game. He is somebody who they're really, really protecting, and the only way he's going to lose is by something like that, some kind of a screw job sort of thing. So Edge wins, capitalizes on that and gets the WWE Championship. Doesn't hold it super long, but he wins it. And he kind of sets the tone for how this is going to go. I think Edge is somebody who's in the discussion.
I wouldn't have started with this just because this is he's clearly going on the Mount Rushmore, and just with the first cash in alone, never minding the fact that he will factor into several of these next discussions that we'll be having. Edge set the tone for Money in the Bank. We did not know what Money in the Bank was. I remember Eric Bischoff saying, "All right, so I assume you're just going to fight Batista tonight?" And he was like, no, I'm going to cash it in when it's best for me. And at the time, you're still thinking, well, he's got to announce that he's cashing in and then have the match. And no, he just cashes in randomly after a chamber, and suddenly a new rule that every promotion has, bitten off of is born, where you can just have this item that you cash in randomly as a story device. And it's fantastic.
I think we also have to just discuss the fact that 2005 was a game-changing year for Edge in general. That's when Edge transitions from a guy who could have always just been a maybe guy, an upper mid-carder that occasionally gets opportunities for the title but never wins it, into being somebody who could be a bona fide main event talent going forward and be a multi-time world champion. 2005, he obviously wins the briefcase in the first match. And the first Money in the Bank ladder match is one of the best Money in the Bank ladder matches as well. It's one of the most memorable at the very least. And, wins it at WrestleMania. Then the whole 2005 is his relationship with Lita, the feud with Kane started off with, then the feud with Matt Hardy afterwards. And he gets involved with Ric Flair over the Intercontinental Championship, and then it culminates with the cash-in on John Cena. And again, it's really interesting cash-in because you only get that one first opportunity to essentially sneak in with the briefcase, because once you do it for the first time, I know that everyone's going to expect you to always use the briefcase that way, but everyone will kind of be waiting to see if whoever's holding the briefcase is going to cash in. Whereas at this point, no one knew how the briefcase really worked. We were told, but we didn't know how it was going to work. So to see it in practice, it was a really shocking moment, especially because Ed wrestled on that card. He lost. Well, he lost via DQ in an Intercontinental title match with Ric Flair. So he'd already competed on that show, just was in some other random feud at this point in time. Then Cena wins the chamber match, and you just see Edge come out, hand the briefcase to Vince McMahon, and the rest is history. This set the tone for Edge's career as a main event talent. And so, yeah, it's a very pivotal cash in, not just in setting the stage for what Money in the Bank would be going forward, but basically a launching pad for Edge's career, really.
It kind of checks off everything that you would want.
Yeah.
It takes a guy from a mid-card or upper mid-card spot, puts him in the main event, gives him his first world championship. It's a shock because nobody had seen it coming before. It protects the champion. It's a heel, which makes more sense because why wouldn't a heel be taking advantage of a situation like that? Taking advantage of a situation like that in and of itself is something that makes perfect sense, because it never makes a whole lot of sense when somebody's like, I'm going to challenge you for this thing and I'm going to give you all the time in the world for whatever, unless they're a babyface and they're just being like, the honorable type of thing, but that's boring. So you get the fan surprise element of it. The fact that they had John Cena in that Elimination Chamber meant that was a good setup for it, because they could have just easily not done that. And that card would have been like, we got why do I keep wanting to say Hell in a Cell match? An Elimination Chamber match. So that's the selling point of the pay-per-view. It's not like they were going like, well, you need something kind of, how like the last Hell in a Cell that we just had, where we were kind of saying, hey, if Brock returns, at least that'll be the type of thing where they go, well, we got you the Brock thing. Of course, it didn't end up happening. But, like, he holds it for 280 days as well. So this is well past the point of, let's just do this concept and get it out of the way. This is, let's do a slow burn. Let's wait for the right moment. I wouldn't quite say it's long-term storytelling. I think the WWE likes that term a little bit too well and doesn't really apply when it needs to be. But at least this was, let's hold off until we need to do it or it's the right time, instead of, just get it out of the way so we don't have to worry about it anymore. We'll see that with some people here on this list. There's some that are just like, we're going to write them off immediately. It's just, nope, not going to happen. I think that Edge, for even just this one, is worth potentially being in the Mount Rushmore. Is everybody good for putting him in the maybe pile, at least right now?
Well, I mean, obviously he's going to be in the maybe pile because we're not even done talking about him in any way, shape, or form. But also, you got to give him this. He coined the phrase Mr. Money in the Bank. Everybody uses now. He coined the phrase. So he deserves so much credit for what this briefcase is, and that's why I keep saying that I would have him win it this year, just because the state of the briefcase today needs somebody like him to revive it and show what the briefcase can be.
Yeah, the complete opposite of what the briefcase stands for. We should definitely do that at Money in the Bank.
Well, I don't
give the briefcase to an old battered veteran who doesn't need another world championship, rather than what basically Edge's cash-in shows what you should do with a briefcase. Give it to an upper mid-card guy, build them up with storylines throughout the year, and then have them cash in and become like a main eventer, an actual star, rather than give it to a star who's not going to do anything with the briefcase other than maybe win another world championship. Like, oh, great.
I understand.
He's already won the world championship. Let's give him another world championship because that makes him slightly more of a star.
I understand your point 100%. I don't think people know how to be a star anymore. And at this point, I'd rather have a star hold it.
Well, he's already a star. He doesn't need a briefcase.
What I'm saying is,
why do we give every single title to John Cena, Triple H, Edge, and everything like that, and just leave it? Leave it like that because there's nobody else. Because nobody else clearly can get over in this company. So why do we even bother having them do matches? Even
hey, don't give them ideas.
Yeah, I mean, really. Well, what I'm saying here is we're gonna get to a Baron Corbin at some point in this discussion and go, my God, they really don't even try with the briefcase anymore.
Yeah, I know, but that's just them being lazy. It's not going to do you think Edge holding the briefcase is going to make them? Well, it might make them care slightly more about it, but it doesn't mean that it's actually going to get any better. It doesn't mean, and also, secondly, it doesn't mean they're actually going to learn any lessons after Edge cashes in the briefcase, and the next person coming along will be better. So So I think just keep giving it to young guys, and hopefully at one point you're going to start caring about it again. That's basically all we can hope for at this point.
I'll say, when it comes to this year's Money in the Bank, we don't know who is currently going to compete. We're still missing about half the field for even just like qualifying matches. But I'm really hoping that this year that they do something kind of along the lines of maybe Big E cashes in and beats Bobby Lashley. I'd love to see something like that, but it's another discussion for another day. We'll talk about that in the upcoming weeks. So Edge is in the maybe pile. Now, number 2 is, for 2006, we got Rob Van Dam. He held it for 70 days, and he is, actually, no, okay, I was just going to say, if I remember correctly, but I'm looking at the notes right now, he's not the first one to defend the Money in the Bank briefcase.
No, Edge defended it in the Raw Homecoming, yeah.
Yeah, but RVD calls his shot in advance. He challenges John Cena and successfully wins the title. And just like Edge, doesn't really hold it too much longer after that, but for completely different reasons. He, ran into a situation with his substance abuse problems that completely killed off his push. And I at this point, every time I say his push, I just think of JR. Every time I'm just like push, just every single time. But
I also want to clarify, he doesn't have substance abuse problems. He just smokes weed, and weed's illegal, and you shouldn't be carrying like a certain amount of weed in a car or something.
Yeah, wait a minute, Tony. Did you say that he has substance abuse issues? No, he's just a pothead, which is like everybody in 2021.
Well, that's how it ends up getting taken away from him, is because of that. And
he has a law enforcement problem, not a drug problem.
It's a better way to put it, maybe. But RVD is not somebody I think should go on the Mount Rushmore for this. And this is not just my I think that RVD's overrated thing. I look at this as he didn't hold it in a long enough way that really feels like it's super duper worth it to me. I kind of think, generally speaking, there's 2 ways of going about Money in the Bank. You cash it in super quick, or you wait for the right time. If you wait a little bit of time and cash it in, and it just so happens to happen at a time frame that you could have done something similar anyway without Money in the Bank, I think it's kind of a waste. So I look at like the RVD thing. Now, that's at a time frame when I wasn't really back to watching yet from my hiatus of watching WWE. So I was getting back into it, but I wasn't fully into it yet. This is around the time that I WrestleMania 22 is, I didn't watch WrestleMania 22 when it happened, but I eventually watched it afterward. And I had seen some of this kind of build up tangentially and a little bit of more of like, there's Rob Van Dam. Oh, I know Rob Van Dam from, a couple years ago, and he's carrying this briefcase, and what's going on with that? I don't know. It's some kind of thing they're doing now. Like that kind of thing. I still wasn't fully caught up yet. But you could have had Rob Van Dam just win a number 1 contenders match and fight John Cena. And I feel like it accomplishes the same thing. I'd rule him out as a Mount Rushmore thing. I think that there are so many ways that could have been better for him, and that things could have worked out better if, he wouldn't have gotten caught with too much weed and stuff.
So I understand completely, and I agree. I don't think he's on the Mount Rushmore, but Rob Van Dam, you're looking at it from hindsight. At the time, the perspective and the perception is Edge is just a scumbag who, took advantage of this briefcase. RVD is only number 2, so yeah, he announces where he's going to do it, because you can still think, okay, that's how this is supposed to be done. You don't know yet that, the briefcase should be used like this, so he has to do it a certain way, and then if you're going to go like this, just have him win a number 1 contenders match. You don't know that yet. So I'll say that to his credit. But yeah, the title reign and everything else that happened wasn't great, so I don't think he's on the Mount Rushmore. Cool briefcase, though.
That's another factor too. If anybody did any kind of personalization, we got to talk about that for sure.
And I think he's absolutely in the discussion for Mount Rushmore. I know you two have basically ruled him out already, but my argument
you
would
could
be...
still sway me.
My argument would be that RVD, even though he's like the other type of person to win the briefcase, which is a veteran who has always been on the cusp of a title win and has always just fallen short. And so this is his opportunity to get the title match that he's had opportunities, but the opportunity that he's deserved for a long time and has never really been given that level of a push. And so when he wins it at WrestleMania 22, the pop is huge because everyone loves Rob Van Dam, even at that point.
Yeah, he's super over. So,
and he feuds with Shelton Benjamin over the briefcase and the Intercontinental Championship. So he's Intercontinental Champion at the same time as being Mr. Money in the Bank for a while as well. So give that to his credit. So it's not like they continue to push him. He's not like one of these more recent Money in the Bank briefcase holders where, okay, so he's won the briefcase, so we can start just jobbing him out every single week because he's got the briefcase. So eventually he'll be world champion or he'll get an opportunity at it. They actually continue to keep him in the upper mid card area. And then I love the cash in on Cena basically saying that he's gonna, because even though it's a quote unquote like him giving the champion fair warning, he tells Cena, we're going to do this at One Night Stand. Whereas the interpretation is that Cena probably wouldn't have been at One Night Stand unless RVD said, I'm cashing in my briefcase on you here. Because what incentive is there for John Cena to defend his title in an ECW show? RVD basically stacks the deck completely against Cena by putting it in his own place. The match itself is very good, even though obviously it gets a bit chaotic with Edge getting involved and all that stuff. But then you have the massive pop of him winning in front of the ECW faithful. He becomes both WWE and ECW champion for a while. And yeah, the title reign is cut short and it is overall disappointing just because of the way that it ended. But I feel like RVD was a very different type of Money in the Bank winner to Edge. And Edge is like the archetype which a lot of people have followed ever since, like the opportunistic cash-in with a heel person holding the briefcase. But I feel like you needed to have this baby face establishing, like challenging in advance to show that there's depth and variety to the briefcase rather than just being a one-trick pony.
I think that RVD's situation, it can be kind of summed up as I don't know if this is really like the best analogy, but it's what popped in my mind. Not many people really love Iron Man 2, but you need Iron Man 2 for the entire MCU. It's a standalone, it's not the best film, but when you go back and you watch all the movies, you're like, all right, that served a lot of purposes. And like RVD being a babyface and challenging in a different way and being a mid-carder who goes up to the main event and stuff, there are definitely big positives when it comes to that. But I look at it and I just kind of go, all right, well, that ended up being kind of a waste in hindsight. And we do have to judge it based off of hindsight because now we know how things play out. So we know that, like, we have to judge how they cashed in, whether it mattered, that kind of thing. I think that we're just going to end up coming up with way too many other people that could be on there. But I'll put them on the maybe list for now, just in case.
I do like Callum's argument that he really shows the other side of what the briefcase could be, because when RVD won this briefcase, it did feel like, okay, finally he's going to win the title, because without it, maybe he wouldn't have, and go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that your analogy of comparing it to Iron Man 2 is you exposing your biases now. Because you're just saying it because you didn't like the Money in the Bank reign or didn't think that it was overall very significant, whereas actually probably a lot of people, this might be a lot of people's favourite Money in the Bank reign because it was RVD.
Well, I like Iron Man too.
Well, you just said that like a lot of people don't like it.
Yeah.
So you're basically saying that a lot of people wouldn't think the RVD thing. You don't know that. Have you asked a lot of people?
Yeah, that is true.
You've asked two people here, and we both said that we think the RVD one is pretty important. So.
Well, for a Mount Rushmore, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like to say, like, out of all the people who were successful in the full range of Money in the Bank, I've seen plenty of arguments before about Rob Van Dam's Money in the Bank being like, well, Edge was the real person feuding with Cena at the time. and he was just kind of a stopgap and stuff. So it's like, you know.
I'll kind of make the overarching argument that a lot of the people that we're going to be discussing as potential future, well, as other people that might get onto this Mount Rushmore, they're all just Edge copycats. At least RVD's different.
And I want to just piggyback on that and say, we're going to talk about a lot of names in a little bit that don't match up to RVD in any way. So even though, yes, you can say a lot about RVD's run and how it played out, he's still up there just because of the fact that like they've had so many duds since then.
I will say my general idea for this, I'm not going to weigh the idea of Edge did it and they did something similar, so it has no value, and the only thing that matters to me is whether or not it's different. I'm going to judge entirely based off of the individual reigns and then kind of go back and see. So, like, I don't have a 4. Like, I haven't actually figured out a 4 that I would go with yet. But maybe, you know, I mean, I'll put Rob Van Dam in the maybe.
I'm not saying definitively that RVD is going to be in my top list, but I'm going to say that if he's not in the actual Mount Rushmore, he should be on the layer below that, like the B tier one.
There are definitely some that absolutely 100% are not going to get even a minute's worth of discussion. So, I mean, we only have a list of about 30 people. Maybe even not that many.
It's 20. It's less than 25, I think.
Yeah, and some of them are repeats, so we're not going to have the same name twice and stuff. So we have about like 20-something people, and some of them, a good like 5 or 6 of them are just like, yeah, absolutely not. So, I mean, you know, we'll see. One of them that I can say, I think, with relative ease, that is not going to be on our Mount Rushmore is Mr. Kennedy.
No, this is one that had potential, and it kind of posited the idea that we've seen play out in the future with the countdown to WrestleMania idea. Mm-hmm. And that was an awesome idea.
That would have been great.
Yeah, it was a really, really good idea, whoever came up with it. But the fact of the matter is that as soon as, like, and I know we're looking at it through 2021 eyes, but as soon as you made that announcement, if you're watching 2021, you'd think, okay, well, he's probably not even holding the briefcase by the time WrestleMania comes around, because it was a great concept, and then everything just goes off the rails. And that's basically the story of Mr. Kennedy's WWE career. Just like, oh, they've got a lot of ideas here, and he has potential, but then something is going to go wrong.
Now, I think if you're looking at the idea of doing something different, you have Edge cashes in with a surprise after 280 days. RVD calls a shot ahead of time. Kennedy calling a shot ahead of time, but specifically saying, I'm going to cash this in at WrestleMania. If they could have played that out, that could have been really, really cool for it to be like somebody wins the Royal Rumble and we don't have a number 1 contender for one of the other belts, and Kennedy is like, you know, kind of lingering this like black cloud above the whole thing. There are negatives that goes along with it too, because he only holds it for 36 days. That's not long at all. But if we would have seen that play out, there's a chance that maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, whatever months down the line, people would have been like, why do I care about Kennedy being Mr. Money in the Bank? He said he's not going to cash it in until Mania. So let's just ignore that until April. Could have been like that. That's something we didn't get a chance to see, because instead what ends up happening is we get this just slew of injuries. There was something like 7 people that got injured in the span of like a month and a half. That's
a bad year. That's a really bad year and a really bad summer.
If I'm remembering correctly, what happens is Undertaker gets injured.
Yep.
And they're planning on having Mr. Kennedy cash in and surprise win the championship because they need an out. And then Kennedy gets injured. So they have Edge beat Kennedy with the briefcase on the line in essentially a last-ditch effort of like, well, we just gotta do something here, so let's just do that. And Edge cashes in the Money in the Bank on The Undertaker, who gets taken out after was it cage match, I think, with Batista?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then Mark Henry attacks him.
Yep.
Also bringing Mark Henry back.
And then after Edge is champion, then is it Batista that gets injured next?
No. Edge gets injured soon after that. He has a short feud with Batista over the championship, and then he gets injured.
Doesn't Kane or Batista get injured as well?
No, because they're fighting Khali.
Oh, that's right. That's the Khali crap.
They are, but Batista had an injury that he was actually able to work through. So he was injured, but he was just able to work through it.
It was just, that was, to quote Conrad with the whole snake bit, it was just like, now I'm firmly watching at this point. Like, I mean, it's 2006 is my year of kind of easing back into it. 2007, I am full blown in. And I'm watching this go down, and I'm like, when Mr. Kennedy wins, I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, I like this Kennedy guy. This is going to be great. And I love Edge, of course, and all this stuff, and Undertaker, and I like Mark Henry, and I like, Kane's involved, and it's just madness. And I'm sitting there going, God damn, when's the next switch going to happen? Because it's just like, okay, give it to this guy, who gives it to that guy, who passes it to that, who gets injured, who passes it to whatever. So this year is supposed to be Kennedy holding it for an entire year, and instead, in just over a month, Kennedy drops it to Edge, who cashes in on The Undertaker, and then 4 people get injured and everything, and this is a mess, but it's kind of awesome.
So, first of all, Kennedy, we still have yet to see somebody go, I'm cashing in at Mania, and then actually follow through.
Yeah.
So that's still something they can play out in the long run if they want to. Kennedy would have been great. I like the countdown clock on the website. But Edge gives us another rule here. Oh, you can jump shows with this briefcase. So this is an amazing cash-in, because at this point you're like, oh, Batista and Undertaker are fighting again. That's exciting. And all of a sudden they're like, breaking news, Edge wins the world title. What, like, that came out of nowhere. So this is a great cash-in. Everything else that follows it sucks. But the cash-in itself is one of the best of all time.
And totally on Edge's positivity. Because Kennedy, of course, gets nothing. And Kennedy's injury doesn't even really last long.
No, it was a short-term thing that they completely overblew, so he's basically back within a month anyway.
That's another thing, which sucks, because they were like, oh yeah, he's going to be out for like 6 months, and he was back in a month. Poor guy could have probably been world champion.
If they would have had the foresight for that, he would have won the championship, and they would have waited a couple weeks or so to have him do anything. And then he would have been, a former world champion, and his whole career probably would have been a completely different trajectory.
And I agree with that, because even though we're going to talk about a guy in a little bit who does win the world title with this and still does the mid-card rounds for the next 10 years, Kennedy, if he'd have won it in 2007, that was in a time where they still took this shit seriously. So if he'd have been a former world champion, he would have been made.
Even just the idea of being able to say you're a former world champion is something that's like a massive, massive boost. Because once you win it once, you can always win it again, because they go, well, we did give it to him before, that kind of thing. So it's like, Kennedy is absolutely 100% not on this list. He held it for a little over a month. He had a big proposition that fell through. He didn't end up cashing it in at all. Total failure of a Mr. Money in the Bank. And it's not his fault. Edge, though, gets a boost. Because the guy gets that switch over to SmackDown. He gets another surprise cash in. Another world championship reign. And it starts off an amazing feud against Undertaker.
Yep.
That feud is one of my favorite feuds of all time.
And at this point, he's been involved with 3 of 3 cash-ins because he helped RVD beat Cena.
So I don't know about how you guys feel about it. I think Edge, in a sense, because we're not going to do, Edge number 1, Edge number 2, or whatever. Edge being with both of these, it's just sort of like, all right, Edge is on the list. and you factor in both.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. That's the thing. Of course, Edge is on this Mount
Yeah,
Rushmore.
Realistically, Tony, this is about the discussion. We kind of know most of who the 4 names are going to be.
I don't know, because I think that there's room for debate about a couple of them.
I think there's 2 absolute guarantees, but yeah,
and
Edge is one of them.
Edge is the only
guy I'm going to talk about next is the other one. So.
Edge is the only one of this whole list that I honestly say there's no discussion. He's absolutely on it. Everybody else, I think it's worth a debate. Every single other person, including CM Punk.
You're wrong. You're wrong. CM Punk is on the Mount Rushmore.
Well, CM Punk has the distinction of being the only back-to-back winner. He is the first 2-time true winner because Edge, of course.
He's not the only back-to-back winner. Carmella won it back-to-back as well.
That is correct.
Yeah, technically speaking, yeah, they did kind of count that as 2. So,
technicalities. That's what you love me for.
But Edge, he won the first one. He does win a second one. It's not back-to-back, and it's technically he wins it from somebody else. So he didn't really win the Money in the Bank ladder match. CM Punk did. Now, this is weird as well because he wasn't supposed to. This was during the time frame where it was very clear Jeff Hardy was heading in that direction. And then Jeff Hardy's problems come back and it screwed it all up. Much more applicable. But at WrestleMania 24, CM Punk beats Carlito, Chris Jericho, John Morrison, MVP, Mr. Kennedy, and Shelton Benjamin. He wins that. 92 days later, he cashes in on JBL, right? Remember
Edge.
Correctly? Oh, Edge. Why am I thinking JBL? Oh, he feuds with JBL.
Because he feuded JBL.
Yeah, I'm just, it's burned in my brain that's a terrible feud with JBL afterward. But he wins the World Heavyweight Championship. That's right. It's on Raw. It's cashed in on Edge, and that's the whole Edge finally gets cashed in on instead of somebody cashing in on Edge cashing in on somebody else, that kind of thing. That's right. And
it's the rare example of the fact that because the heel is so unlikable at this point and has done this stuff in the past twice before, that even though the babyface essentially feeds on a prone body, you actually like the babyface more at the end of it.
Was it Batista that laid Edge out?
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. This was like
it was the night before at I think it was Night of Champions, I believe, or whatever it was being called at that point in time.
Night of Champions.
Edge cheated to beat Batista in a Batista last chance match for the title, and Edge was drafted to Raw.
So
Edge was drafted to SmackDown, wasn't he?
No, Edge was.
Was it Batista was going to Raw?
Yeah.
And Edge was going to leave it on SmackDown, so he just came to Raw to gloat.
So here's why this happened. They had just done the draft. The 2 matches at Night of Champions, which were just brand respective world title matches, then became Raw versus SmackDown, WWE World Championship and WWE Championship. And both belts ended up on SmackDown until they started using the Money in the Bank as your get out of jail free card. Punk cashes in on Edge. The first cash in that is just like, I don't even know what to call it, just sort of like a 24/7 rule. Like there's no match beforehand or after or anything. It's just, Edge is laying in the ring. Let me grab a ref and cash in this briefcase. Sets up another rule that you can just literally do this at the drop of a hat. Punk is now a 1-time champion. The belts are fixed. Another great moment involving Edge and the Money in the Bank briefcase.
And unfortunately, a shitty championship reign for Punk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like they gave him the title and they had no idea about what to do with him for it. Like, 'cause he was a popular dude, but clearly he wasn't a Vince McMahon guy, and that's something that followed him for his entire career, pretty much. But yeah, he was given the title after having a fairly good run in ECW. Then he was stuck in dead-end feud with Batista, where he didn't really beat Batista because
Batista was the babyface that we're not beating Batista. He's about to fight John Cena,
and he's the guy that they like better. So of course,
and then the Death Knell, you feud with JBL. So like, if you're having a match with JBL at SummerSlam, then you really they clearly don't give a fuck about your title, right?
Yeah, this is a couple years past JBL's heyday, so it's not like he's super hot of a heel.
JBL's first retirement.
Yeah, this is post-retirement JBL.
Yeah, it's really kind of outside of the Kennedy situation, Punk's the first failure winner of Money in the Bank.
He is, and I think if you want to give him an out, you can go, well, that's because he just wasn't supposed to win it. You know, they were gung-ho on Jeff Hardy that year and would remain so until he wins the belt in December. And honestly, I agree with their reasoning. I agree with the idea that Jericho and Michaels needed the world title. But I think there are other ways to get belts off of people than just going, Randy Orton kicked him in the head, so he doesn't have a match to win it, and he doesn't have a match to lose it. That's where we're at with CM Punk at this point. And then he goes on to become tag team champions with Kofi Kingston. Like, nothing comes out of this.
It's really bad. And
yeah, he becomes a Triple Crown champion in the space of a couple of months after this. Like, he wins the tag titles and then he wins the Intercontinental Championship, like in January or late December or something like that.
This is at the point where CM Punk, in the eyes of the people making decisions, probably is like a Kofi, where if you look at Kofi today, Kofi's still there, and Kofi's doing awesome. They're probably looking at Punk like, okay, you can be here forever if you want to be, but I don't see you as a star. And that would change with the next one.
Yeah, and that does give him the chance to be a former world champion on paper at the very least, and not a great amount of momentum, but enough momentum and enough goodwill and negativity from the fans about how things went down that they switched things up a little bit. And the next year, he wins again. WrestleMania 25, Punk is back-to-back winner. This time, he doesn't hold it as long. Only 63 days. And this time, when he cashes in and takes advantage of another situation, he turns heel in the process.
It's the most interesting thing about this in general is not just necessarily him turning heel as a result of the cash-in. He turned heel by winning the briefcase. Because everyone wanted Christian to win the briefcase. Everybody wanted Christian to win the briefcase in that match. And when Punk won it, he's booed. And this is the catalyst to the idea of oh, maybe we can actually turn this guy heel and see what he does with it. And they basically go from Christian, let's go for another guy who is synonymous with the TLC ladder matches, Jeff Hardy, turning on him because everyone loves Jeff Hardy.
And it works really well for Punk to cash in on Jeff Hardy.
Yeah, and that feud with Jeff Hardy is just immense. You talk about obviously the Undertaker Edge feud being one of the best in recent memory, and that's definitely true. But I think the Punk Hardy feud is right up there as well. Just two completely contradicting cultures.
Yeah,
and it just works so well about Jeff Hardy is the guy because Punk's right in his assessments about the idea of this guy's a screw up and he always whenever opportunity strikes him, he always fails and he always gets in his own way. And Jeff Hardy's still just super popular though, because even though he is a screw up, he doesn't make any bones about who he is, or doesn't he's not going to change for anybody, and people have a deep amount of respect for that, and also love the fact that he just throws himself off shit. And that's so it's one of those feuds where you kind of understand what the heel is saying if you're smart enough, but then you still love the guy who's the babyface. Oh, this guy is a screw up, but we love him, so we don't want we hate the fact that you're just calling him out for being what he is, essentially.
Yeah, you're you're right, but don't be a dick about it, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a really great example of even just the turn itself of being no, we are definitively making Punk a heel. He's cashing in on Jeff. That's going to skyrocket his momentum. And I really like Punk's second time around with this.
You keep saying they definitively made him a heel. They didn't. The way this played out on television was I just cashed in on a guy who won a grueling ladder match. If I had cashed in on Edge, you'd be cheering me. I just happened to cash in on a guy. So then they do a three-way feud for a little bit with Edge and Hardy, where it's Edge is the definitive bad guy, Punk is the middle ground, and Hardy's the beloved babyface. And then Punk gets into the I'm straight edge, I'm better than you, which is just so good with Jeff Hardy. And I'll say this, SmackDown 09 was underrated in terms of how much good they had going on. And it's a great cash in. He does get booed at Mania, but that's because Christian just came back to ECW for some reason, and people wanted, hey, if he cashes in, if he wins here, he can cash in on Edge, and we can get that match, which we never do. And that's why they booed Punk, and it just keeps going from there. And I love this era of CM Punk.
So he is somebody that I'm definitely bumping up on our list.
Yeah, he's again. I don't want to like just immediately say that he's going to be in the Mount Rushmore, but he's one of the big contenders. Option. Yeah, I like the fact we've covered like only 4 people at the moment, but then again, we're going to get across a lot of people who just say nah, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
but, it's just interesting, like how much more the Money in the Bank seemed to matter earlier.
Yep.
Well, like basically everything with WWE, it's a toy that they eventually get tired of, and it becomes more of a burden than it actually becomes something that they can actually do something creative with.
Let's get into one of those ones that's guaranteed no. The next one is Jack Swagger. He holds it for 2 days. Technically 2, they constituted as 5 days because SmackDown's recorded in advance kind of a thing. But he wins it at WrestleMania, and on the next episode of SmackDown that they recorded on Tuesday nights back then, and they aired it on Fridays or Thursdays or whatever it was, he cashes in, and at this point, we're having Chris Jericho and Edge feuding for this championship.
Yep.
And he just comes out of nowhere and beats Jericho.
Thanks to Edge.
It sucks. Like, it's another guy who is in that mid-card range that gets bumped up to the World Championship, and they took a shot at making him a guy that they could be, that next level and everything, but it just doesn't work out. And is it Money in the Bank next when he loses it?
He loses it at Fatal 4-Way.
Fatal 4-Way is when he loses it? Yeah. So it's he drops it to Rey Mysterio, and there's not a damn thing that happens in the meantime that I can remember. It's something that he can hang his hat on for the rest of his career if I'm a former world champion. Yeah, but this is another just didn't work kind of things.
So Swagger for me, it's not because I like the guy, but this is the one world title win where I go, okay, this is where world title wins stopped mattering with this one. Because for some reason, it's not just that they gave it to him. At WrestleMania, he debuts this like new entrance robe. They're literally trying to make him Kurt Angle. With this run, they give him the ankle lock. They do all this stuff to try to make him Kurt Angle. And at the time, Kurt Angle's still very much in the business and very healthy going on with TNA.
I don't know about very healthy, though.
Well,
seemingly very healthy. Yeah.
That's neither here nor there. He could still go. So it felt like, wow, WWE's at this point where this guy's just going to be bootleg Kurt Angle. That kind of sucks. And this ladder match featured Christian, Ziggler, McIntyre when he was still the chosen one, Kane, Hardy, MVP, Benjamin. Like, there were better options here. And we go from Edge and Chris Jericho to Swagger and Big Show and the Swagger Soaring Eagle, and it all just sucked. And I think that this is the beginning of the downward turn for WWE in general, not just like the briefcase.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be so harsh on Swagger, basically saying that he ruined the WWE, but
No, I'm saying the booking of Swagger began this like laziness that they just have fallen into comfort with.
There's one thing that I credit this Money in the Bank for, is the fact that Swagger didn't fucking mess around with this thing, in the idea that he tried to cash it in immediately on Raw. On who I can't remember who was the champion.
Cena. Yeah. He did.
So he immediately tried to cash in on Cena, and that failed. And so he says, "Okay, I'm just going to take my next opportunity when it comes to it." It's like I would have loved a situation where it's just a guy who's constantly, every single week, he's trying to cash in, every single week he's trying to do it, and the champion has to always be on his toes because this guy's always going to be cashing in.
Yeah, that'd been cool.
It's not so much a case of like, oh, he's picking his spot and something like that and waiting for an opportunity. He just sees the champion and he goes for it. And I think that would be a pretty cool gimmick to have for somebody in future. But they obviously just decided, okay, we're going to do it after 2 days. And yeah, it's just like he wasn't ready. Like the reign itself is largely forgettable. Like again, it's one of those ones where if you know you're feuding with Big Show pretty much out of the gate, then you know it's probably not gonna go too well for you in the long run.
You know what though? I'll say this about the booking and like the just unfortunate timing. He's supposed to feud with Taker. Taker's in the Fatal 4-Way. He gets injured and takes some time off. Swagger's supposed to have a little bit of a run with The Undertaker, which at the very least might have produced some matches that said, okay, this guy is legit. Let's keep running with him. But when you're only working with the Big Show and then you're in a 4-Way, you're screwed.
It's one of those examples where you give the briefcase to a guy who you do have plans for, you do see potential in, but you just jump the gun too soon. Like he needed another, because he'd only recently, I think, moved to Raw from ECW after a decent run as the champion there, and then he moved to Raw and basically did nothing for a long time. And yeah, that he needed more momentum going into this match to be taken seriously, or you needed to give him the briefcase and then give him a decent run with the briefcase, so he felt like a credible champion, rather than a guy who was just who basically made me seem like, okay, I know I'm not really championship material, so I'm just gonna go for it and see what happens.
It's kind of simultaneously rushed, where they don't want to wait till he builds himself up to get to the point where it would work better, and then also rushed to just get rid of it, instead of being like, all right, you made your bed, now sleep in it for a little while and see if you can break it in.
Well, there's a reason for that as well, is because 2010, you have the Money in the Bank ladder match at WrestleMania, but then they're also planning to do a Money in the Bank pay-per-view.
Right.
So
they had to get the briefcase off him quickly.
It's a shame that they didn't have the foresight for that, to just not do it at WrestleMania. And then have Money in the Bank as a pay-per-view, and then maybe at that point, maybe Swagger could have naturally gotten to that level.
I don't think Swagger gets it.
I don't think so. I think that they would have gone with some kind of a bigger name just for the sake of it, because what we got was Raw and SmackDown have 2 separate Money in the Bank briefcases, and the first one of which is Kane, and the second one is The Miz. Kane barely holds it. And this is really kind of cool too, because he cashes in 50 minutes later. He beats Rey Mysterio, and that's the first time that we ever get somebody cash in the same day that they are Mr. Money in the Bank. He also takes advantage of, he beats the guy that's like, a third his size. And Kane gets his first real world title reign, because technically he had the belt, but he had it for 24 hours, so it counted, but it doesn't count. And at that point, that was well over a decade prior. So I was super happy about this.
His reign is great. He has a great reign. I think he shows so much more mic skills than he's ever done in his career up to this point. And I feel like he felt like a world champion.
Yeah. It's like the crowning thing for his career, kind of. And it's great, even just for our Money in the Bank thing, because we get something fun with the quick cash-in. It's a logical cash-in. Rey Mysterio just had a match. And he could pick him up and toss him into the fucking 4th row. Like, he's going to be able to beat Rey Mysterio that's just gotten beaten down. And Kane does have a good, solid championship reign after that. So it's not a mid-card guy that you're boosting to the main event, but it's also the first time that you're going, you know what? It doesn't need to be a mid-card guy that could be boosted to the main event. Maybe it's somebody who they never got their chance to have a real world championship reign, and we're going to give it to him now. So that sets a new precedent as well. It can be somebody who's held the championship before, and it can be somebody who their best years are probably behind them, but they can still have another great run.
And look, that Undertaker-Kane rivalry, it's not their best, but I'd argue that that's Kane at his verbal best. That's a really good version of Kane. And I love this run. And even though it's not like a Money in the Bank that you think of when you think of Money in the Bank, this is a phenomenal moment for a guy who really deserved it.
I'd put Kane in at least the maybe pile.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I would do the same for The Miz. The Miz wins at that same pay-per-view. He's the Raw representation. And he beats a lot of people that could have beaten him for the position. Ted DiBiase seemed like he was a really good choice at that point. You got Randy Orton, you got Chris Jericho, you got John Morrison, you got Edge again, Mark Henry, and Evan Bourne. Evan Bourne, pretty much people didn't expect to win, but I mean, he was still popular and everything too. So Miz breaks this barrier, and he's somebody who, at that point, a lot of people still, at this point, don't think that he's somebody who should be some, like, 5-time world champion or anything, but Miz goes past what his expectations are. He wins the Money in the Bank. He is a cocky douchebag heel who can be the weasel, and he holds it for 127 days, and he eventually cashes in on Randy Orton. And we get a great moment with the angry Miz girl, and Miz holds the championship for a decent enough reign afterward. I mean, he has his problems where they don't book him really all that well, but for his character, I think this is kind of perfect. He cheats. He's a weasel. He had this reputation ahead of time of like, well, you're not going to make it. So it's like, oh, this jerk ended up winning only through this like half-assed kind of means. Not everybody needs to be a Brock Lesnar who just beats the shit out of everybody. Some people are just these types of characters, and Miz is great at that.
I think that the Miz cash-in should have launched. I'm not saying he should have been The Rock, but he should have been solidified in the upper echelon of WWE for that time. And they failed the Miz after he lost the briefcase, but I think it's a really good run with the briefcase. I think he was a great heel champion for that time, because this is like in the thick of PG, John Cena's in, Fruity Pebble color shirts. Like, this is the thick of that, and The Miz is a great Disney Channel original movie bully, which is exactly what they were going for. And I think they failed him. But it's a great cash-in and a great Money in the Bank.
So, I think that much like Rob was saying about how Jack Swagger launches the top time where the people just don't really put a lot of emphasis on the World Championship anymore, I would say this cash-in and this run as Money in the Bank is the typification of the fact that mediocre is good enough now.
I would agree with that.
Because I think, and I would say by any other metric, The Miz has had a distinctly mediocre career.
See, I think that's where your biases come in.
Well, maybe it is a bias coming in that regard. I'm actually like man enough to own up to it, Tony. But it's like, but it's just the case that I feel like The Miz is a guy who's always should just have been a perennial mid-card, maybe occasional upper mid-card guy. I think the fact that he's associated with WWE Championship has always, at least in my mind, again, it is biases coming in, has always tarnished the WWE Championship to me. Because he's not worthy of it.
I always look at it as...
He's a decent talker. He's a guy that worked really hard to go up from being a reality TV star that got bullied in the locker room to be where he ended up getting to. But I just don't think that his reigns, and let's talk about reigns with WWE Championship based off his Money in the Bank thing, are two reigns where you just look at the WWE Championship and feel like, no, you don't belong with this title. He feuds with fucking Jerry the King Lawler for most of his reign.
Look, Callum is right here in that I did say Swagger starts that. I do think The Miz and the way they treat him after solidifies that, okay, being the world champion doesn't mean as much as it used to. And while it will always mean something for the person, it no longer means something for the brand. Because, like Callum just said, not his first, but one of his major rivalries is with Jerry Lawler. You're going to tell me you waited, by the way, you've had this guy in your company since 92, and you've waited 20 years to go, okay, let's give him a shot at the title. Yes, I agree with Callum here.
It's just like, well, as soon as you having those feuds with Jerry Lawler and stuff like that, you just essentially place him as a guy who isn't a real world champion. And I know the way that he wins it is a guy that, like, he's a mid-card guy that's been given his opportunity. But realistically, a guy who wins the title in that regard should have been like the reign that he has later on with WWE Championship. It should last no longer than a week.
And I'll say this, they did him no favors with the way that they booked him going into Mania, where he was like this turd hanging on the end of Rock versus Cena.
Yeah.
They did him no favor. Oh, hold on. They did him no favors in that he loses in embarrassing fashion to Cena and then loses to Alex Riley, who is literally nobody. So yes, Miz has stuck around, but again, he means so little in the grand scheme of things.
And even though he always talked a big game while he was champion, said like this is my moment, like, because I worked so hard to get here. And I have no doubt that he worked super hard to get there, but it's like the things I've always said, being a hard worker doesn't make you a star. And being a hard worker doesn't make you, like, somebody who's worthy of the world championship. The whole, like, you deserve it era and stuff like that. It's like, well, you don't become champion by deserving it. You become champion because you are a champion. There's just something about you. You have that aura of being a champion.
I think Miz... Go ahead, Tony.
I look at The Miz in a situation like this 2010, this type of era, they've got this split championship and they don't care about both at the same time. And it's very clear with different champions that, like, this is carried on. It still sometimes happens, but it's less now than it was a couple years ago, where, like, they kind of, whether it's the SmackDown or Raw, whether it's Big Gold Belt or the WWE title, there's really one champion, and then there's the B champion, and they go back and forth and they do some other things. And if there was only one championship around this time, it's hard to tell whether or not they would have given this to Kane and done that, or if they would have given this to The Miz, or if they would have done something else. But they probably would have gone with somebody other than those two. And maybe it was Jericho at the time, or maybe it's Orton, whatever it might be. But I don't blame The Miz for a situation like that. I blame WWE for taking a weasel character and not realizing that there's a difference between a weasel that you can get stuff out of and a weasel that you then shit all over. This was the time frame where The Miz could have taken that step forward and then not gone back. And instead, by doing things like the Jerry Lawler feud and whatever, they keep that mentality going. Like,
and I think the fact that we're entering an era now of part-timers. We're entering an era where, okay, The Rock is going to actually wrestle next year at WrestleMania. We don't know it yet, but, like, Brock Lesnar is going to become a thing. Triple H and Undertaker, guys who, quote-unquote, really matter, will now be on television for these big events. And we're going to tell you that these are the guys that matter. And Miz kind of becomes the poster boy for, oh, we'll go back to you when these guys are gone.
Yeah.
He's kind of shit.
But I do think that in the discussion of Money in the Bank, he does propel himself to a world championship. He does exhibit the Weasel character very well. The cash in on Orton is fun. I think he's a really, really solid, worth the discussion Mr. Money in the Bank.
He's in the pile, the maybe pile for me. I think there is a time, and I know we were already doing these podcasts. I think it was when Bryan came back that I thought he could have had a better run. And
Yeah.
he does go on to do something better with it. But Miz, his only really, really good year in WWE was that 2016 run with the IC title. And it seems like that was the only time they were willing to make it seem like he mattered, because he's so comfortable playing the, oh, look at me, I'm the all-two player. That is because he works so hard. But the fact that, like, The Miz is still kind of playing Disney Channel original movie villain 10 years later, it doesn't make sense to me. And it kind of says, this briefcase is now a prop that doesn't mean as much as it used to. And these belts are now props that don't mean as much as they used to.
Miz is one of those guys that suffers from assistant manager problem, where he does a lot of the work and gets very little upward ladder momentum. Now, you could argue that maybe he doesn't deserve to win the championship a bunch of times and stuff like that. So, some people would be like, I wouldn't promote that guy to district manager anyway. But I feel like there's been multiple times where The Miz could have turned things around and they just decided, you're good enough where you are and we don't want to do it, kind of a thing. Same thing for somebody we're going to talk about in a couple spots, but we'll get to Ziggler later on. We have to go through Daniel Bryan and Alberto Del Rio first.
Okay, well, let's definitively say this right now. I don't care if he had if he would have had the greatest ever run and he held the briefcase for multiple, 200 plus days and won the world championship and had the most amazing run off the back of it. No Mount Rushmore I've ever been a part of is going to have Alberto Del Rio on it. So
I co-sign that. I don't even want to talk about him. I
was literally not going to give him any kind of role.
I wanted to be definitively just saying, there's no way that fuckstick is ever going onto any decent Mount Rushmore. He's going to a Mount Rushmore of absolute cocks, but he's never he is never going on a decent Mount Rushmore.
I did not like at all that he won this. I understood at the time that they pushed him in a way that I didn't agree with. And he holds it for 28 days. He wins it in a fashion that I didn't like. I am so sick and tired of the Del Rio championship era of all that stuff. Yeah, it's a no. It's going to be a no for me, dog.
It's a no for all the reasons Callum and Tony mentioned. It's just no all around.
Daniel Bryan's fun, though. And Daniel Bryan, I was actually there for the cash-in, which was extra kind of fun. And it's a bias type of a thing that I'll bring to it a little bit, because I did not expect that cash-in to happen. But that's at TLC.
As you shouldn't have, because the man said, I was told I'd never main event in WrestleMania, so I'm going to cash in at WrestleMania.
Which could be another, okay, that's going to be fun. Like him doing the Kennedy thing we didn't get a chance to see. And then we just decide, Dason, a couple of friends of mine, and we're all like, yeah, let's just go to Baltimore and check out TLC. That'll be fun. And when we're there, we're expecting to have a night of we're chanting for Kevin Nash, and we're, watching Mark Henry fight Big Show, and we're doing this, we're doing that. And Zack Ryder's going to win the United States Championship, which is really cool. And then out of nowhere, Daniel Bryan pops up, and we're like, what the fuck? Holy shit, this is really cool. But he is somebody who gets pushed to that extra level. He is a beloved person at this point that people are super happy to see win the Money in the Bank. He's got this heel character that's switching things up a little bit. And I don't know if I'd go a Mount Rushmore necessarily, but I think it's kind of, at least in the discussion, to go with Daniel Bryan.
I think
Daniel Bryan's whole WWE career, he's a happy accident. Am I right? He's not supposed to cash in at TLC. And then when he does, he starts this great obnoxious thing where he just says, yes, 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 all the time. But he's still he's kind of obnoxious now. I don't know if I like this guy. They have him lose in 18 seconds, which now the yes thing is over because he is great in the ring and all that. And he ends up becoming one of the top superstars in the company because it was kind of supposed to be a joke that this guy was ever even a thing. However, I do want to note that Bryan is the guy where I really started to notice once they give you the briefcase, they beat you every week on television.
Yeah,
he
that
never
really
won a single
sucks.
match. So that's in there for me, but Bryan's fun. This is fun.
I do agree in the sense that as soon as Bryan won the briefcase, it became apparent this guy, he's not really being quote unquote elevated with this briefcase because he is losing every week, and there's still that clear, I would say bias, but that understanding that he's not on a level with other superstars that like Vince sees because he's small and he's an indie guy. But I love the story they tell in the closing stages of his run as that Money in the Bank holder, because he essentially teams up with Big Show, and Big Show's every single week trying to get him to cash in on Mark Henry. And at one point he does cash in on Mark Henry, but we're told that, apparently you can't cash in on someone who's injured, which kind of retcons the whole CM Punk cashing on Edge thing. Even though Edge wasn't injured, he wasn't in any position to compete, but that's neither here nor there. And yeah, that whole narrative they tell of like Bryan always getting opportunity, and then he eventually cashes in on Big Show, the guy that has been encouraging him this whole time, and he fuels this inbuilt animosity and anger towards Michael Cole, because Michael Cole always said that he was never good enough and called him a geek his entire run in NXT, and basically just fuels that into a whole like, I'm the world champion now. And it just becomes the whole story of him just becomes more and more obnoxious. He becomes more and more, he seems to forget how he won the belt, which essentially he just beat up a guy who had already been knocked out.
It was like a TLC match too, right?
Well, it was a chairs match.
A chairs match.
Yeah. And Mark Henry had DDT'd Big Show onto a bunch of chairs after losing, and Bryan just comes out and just pins him. I would love that cash in as well, because like he's been knocked out on a bunch of chairs and he doesn't move for about a minute or whatever, and then Bryan comes out, cashes in. The second that freak out hits, Big Show is up on his knees. It's like, okay, Big Show probably wasn't too happy about the fact that he had to drop his world championship like a minute afterwards. But I feel like the whole run, like Bryan's elevation to being the top babyface in the company within a matter of years starts with this title run, and starts with the heel persona that develops off the back of it. And this is when Bryan went from being, oh cool, he's a good wrestler, and he was over in the indies, so I guess we're supposed to like him in that regard, to being a character, a guy with unbelievable untapped personality that you just never saw in his first like year or so with the company. And I think that's like, so this is like the groundwork for it. I don't know whether it's enough to get him on the full Mount Rushmore. He's definitely in the conversation, just because I feel like it meant so much to his career going forward.
Yeah, I don't think he's as strong of an entry as Edge, but I do think that he's in that range.
You know, and it's really fun too, because this also kicks off a lot of stuff with AJ and that small like little feud that Bryan and Punk had. It's all tied into a lot of cool things that you wouldn't think. So yeah, it's not like this great, well, this kickstarted this, but there's a lot of fun moments that are kickstarted here.
So another fun moment is the next one. Dolph Ziggler wins Money in the Bank, holds it for 267 days, and we're in a situation where it's complete opposite of my idea of super fun to watch the TLC cash in, because I watch WrestleMania and it's kind of blah in most ways, and then the night after WrestleMania, Dolph Ziggler cashes in and he wins the World Heavyweight Championship on Monday Night Raw, and I go, damn it, if that would have happened on Raw, Mania, that would have been at least one of the really good things to stand out. But it's a great cash in, and unfortunately, it's just a great cash in. Because Ziggler is in this range where people wanted him to be that guy in a lot of ways. And people go nuts when he wins this belt and he gets injured. Like, like 2 weeks later or something?
that damn swagger just had to kick him in the head, concussion.
It kind of kills his career.
Yep. I think that's fair.
It's just sort of like, well, we gave you the ball and it got deflated, and it's not your fault. that you couldn't dribble it and take it down and score, but you didn't, so we're just going to give it to somebody else now. And Ziggler runs on this still at this day of this, I should have been the guy type of a thing. And of course, there's arguments that we've gotten into before where it's like, there's time frames where we're like, yeah, you should have, and that's ridiculous. And then there's years where we're just kind of like, all right, well, we get it. Can you move on and tell another story?
I want to say that Kevin Eck, who currently works for Ring of Honor, used to work for WWE, tells the story that Vince McMahon said, all right, we need a Raw after Mania moment, so we're doing Ziggler. We're not pushing Ziggler. So it's like the injury is the cherry on top for Vince to go, see, we're not pushing Ziggler. But I think Ziggler should have been a thing. And his run and his cash-in was probably one of the last two good ones to me. And this is my bias coming through here. Because Ziggler at that point was just on fire. And we could look back on it now and say, he's a little generic, he's a little this, he's a little that. But at that time, when it was like, Cena was at his most obnoxious and Sheamus was at his most obnoxious, Ziggler felt like the one guy, that diehard fans could root for in WWE. Granted, we didn't know, Rollins and Ambrose and all these people would come in, making Ziggler's ability to wrestle kind of one in a pile. But Ziggler was over. I wish this cash-in meant more. So much went wrong here, even though so much went right.
So I'm probably, again, I don't want biases to take over with the Ziggler one as well, because we all know what my takes on Ziggler are, so I don't really want to repeat them in general. But just generally, and maybe this is just due to the time frame that it happened in, and because, even though I was watching every single week, it's not exactly a stellar period in WWE history. I mean, frankly, nothing in the last 10 years is, but it's like, so it all kind of fades into some sort of miasma. I don't remember anything about the Dolph Ziggler run as Mr. Money in the Bank outside of one match with John Cena at TLC with the briefcase on the line with the whole AJ turning on Cena thing, and then the cash-in.
I'll tell you this, he clearly used that briefcase a lot, because by the time he cashes it in, that shit is fucked up.
But it's just like 200, those are 2 days. So it's like the rest of it is 265 days of just him holding the briefcase. I'm sure he talked about it a lot, but nothing about his run sticks out to me.
So here was the problem, and we touched on this before when discussing The Miz. This is at an era where there are 2 championships, and this is firmly in the era where the world title is like a slightly shinier intercontinental title. So that's another reason that not a lot of what he did mattered until he started picking on Cena, because this is firmly in the era of only the shit that Cena does matters. So when he starts fighting Cena, it becomes, okay, this is more important, and you get this cool pairing with AJ, which I think helped the Dolph Ziggler package out. But again, I have to say, I agree with Callum, because of the era that it's in, where not a lot of anything is happening, it is a bit of a blur. But I remember just loving it. Though maybe that's just the sheer bias of my fandom of Ziggler.
So I don't know if you guys are going to agree with me on this one, but this is how I kind of assess this. If we made this specifically, which we're not going to do, Mount Rushmore of Money in the Bank cash-ins, Ziggler's almost guaranteed to be on there.
Yeah, but his cash-in is a perfect storm of a guy who a lot of people were really getting behind, because, as Rob says, he was putting a lot of hard work in and was having great matches at this point, and people thought that, oh, that's cool. Mixed with the fact that you've just come off a pretty meh WrestleMania, and you have Alberto Del Rio as your world champion, who nobody fucking wants as your world champion.
Right.
And a babyface world champion, supposedly.
But since it's not Mount Rushmore of Money in the Bank cash-ins, that's where I go, I don't know about Ziggler. I'd put him at least maybe in the maybe pile for now, but I don't think it's going to be as strong.
I'm not ruling him out because he's definitely a maybe just based on the strength of the cash in and how long he held it. And again, he must have used it a lot because that briefcase was dented. But he's unfortunately not a guaranteed yes, which is kind of sad.
Certainly not a guaranteed no. And he's somebody that I would say more than likely he'd probably be B tier, but yeah, I'll put him in the maybe pile for now.
Okay. Can I just jump to one guaranteed no real quick? Damien Sandow.
Oh, well, we passed by John Cena. And John Cena, I think, is a guaranteed no as well.
That too, fuck. John Cena winning that briefcase could have been so cool. John Cena could have had a lot of fun as Money in the Bank winner. And it was clearly just a plot device for Raw 1000 to set up the thing with The Rock. But it was more so to set up, hey, Punk is heel. Cool. Because they were kind of floundering with Punk. Because again, at that time, it was just so meh.
Yeah, I'll make the judgment call if you guys disagree. Well, whatever. But I think the John Cena discussion is, well, if we decide to do a Mount Rushmore of worst at the end of this, then we'll talk more Cena.
To a degree. His whole babyface shtick of like challenging Punk in advance, a week in advance, it just doesn't sit well because it's Cena. Like, it's not the same as the RVD one. Like, everyone's behind it. It's like, oh, we're going to do it in my backyard. Expect Cena to say, I'm just going to be super respectful and say that it's like you're a great champion, and that's why I'm going to give you advance warning that I'm going to be cashing in and taking that championship. You just go, oh, fuck off, die, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and here's another thing. We talked about feuding with the Big Show before, being the kiss of death. John Cena's in a feud with the Big Show at this point. And it's like really like, oh man, this fucking guy. Everything about him was just so nauseating at the time.
John Cena's fresh off a feud with John Laurinaitis at this point.
That too! Like, John Cena at this point just wasn't in a good space, and he didn't need the briefcase, and it just sort of felt like you're giving it to him just so you could say he's done everything.
Mm-hmm.
I understood. Can I add an extra tick in the negative column because Raw 1000 kicked off the 10-year era of 3-hour Raws that has just been awful?
He also wins it in a match that only has Big Show, Jericho, Kane, and The Miz in it. And it's only
The Miz wasn't even planned for that.
It's the, you can only be in this Money in the Bank match if you've won the championship before, which is a dumb concept. That's really stupid. So then
Ziggler should have been in that one then, because he's won the World Championship beforehand, but he was in the SmackDown one.
And they had said that that's because he didn't win the WWE Championship kind of thing. And it was like, well, Kane technically won because he held the WWE title for a day. And like, it was just, the whole thing was just stupid.
And that's another thing. Callan brings up a good point again. They were not treating the brand lines respectfully at that point. So it was just like, why isn't Ziggler in this one? There's just a lot bad about WWE at that point.
Yeah.
We talk about the one good thing about Cena's reign.
The meme?
The picture?
Yeah. It's the fact that he accidentally unhooks the Money in the Bank briefcase by hitting Big Show repeatedly in the head with it to knock him off. On the second swing, he takes it off, so he has to pose with the briefcase for a while and then hit him one more time to win. Just like, that's a perfect summation of it. Just that one moment.
And that face that he made too, so perfect of like that era where it's, I'm so happy to be here and I'm a baby face, and just everything about it sucked, man.
And then the next Mr. Money in the Bank, the same thing. Not in the same way, but the same thing as in it sucked, is Damien Sandow, who holds it for 106 days, and he gets to personalize it, and he's not won a mid-card title or anything at that point, but he's fun as hell, and he's interesting, and they go, fuck you, we don't care, and they have him be the first person to really, truly lose. Because
really lose.
Kennedy loses the briefcase. So it's like, well, he didn't really get a chance. John Cena calls a shot ahead of time, and then it's just a regular match type of a thing. Sandow has the ability to cash in, and he still is a loser.
And doesn't he jump him from behind too? And he still is a loser. Now I'll say this. The match was good. The match he has with Cena is good. And he cuts a passionate promo afterwards that was also good. But they go nowhere with him.
This kills him.
This doesn't kill him as much as they were in a transitional phase where they don't care about this. They need to get this out of the way because they've decided that in December they're merging the belts. So we need to get this out of the way. And this kind of kills the whole, silence on Damien Sandow, all that stuff. He had a decent run with Cody, because that's another thing. Nobody's expecting him to win here because he comes in as a tag team guy doing a tag team entrance with Cody, and everybody's going, well, clearly Ambrose, who's in the Shield, the hottest angle in the company, is going to win this briefcase and can maybe salvage this shinier Intercontinental Championship. Because this match features Cesaro, Swagger, and Fandango and Wade Barrett. So we're not looking at Sandow here. He does a cool thing with Cody because Cody gets super over in that match for some reason.
Yeah.
And you had a shot. They did a cool personalization. It's just meh, because that's where we were at the point.
I think Sandow's in the discussion as potential worst.
I think he is the worst.
I think there's still maybe one or two
There's
more.
one more worse.
But yeah, he's a guaranteed no.
Yeah, I just don't want to talk about some of these people going forward because it's just like, what's the point? It's like Rob's already said everything that you need to say about Sandow's career. Essentially, Sandow's career is just, who the fuck cares?
We'll touch back on Sandow if we round this out with a 4 worst. Randy Orton's the other one that year, and Randy Orton successfully cashes in. He only holds it for 35 days, but he is used as a tool in a way that sometimes Money in the Bank can be really useful. You give it to a guy that you go, well, at any point we can give the belt to him and we'll feel comfortable with him being champion. So we'll pull the trigger when we need to, kind of a thing. I don't dislike the Randy Orton one.
I think the Randy Orton one kicks off maybe the last really hot story in the main event scene for WWE. This kicks off the Daniel Bryan run. And it's awesome. Everything about this is awesome. Triple H finally turning heel after about a decade of just I'm Triple H, suck it, you know who I am. He was that's what he was doing.
I don't know why, but I'm picturing him at a drive-through.
And then,
hello, sir, can I help you with your order? I'm Triple H, suck it, you know who I
am. That's what he was doing at the point. Randy's great. This was good. It's not on Mount Rushmore because it doesn't matter as far as the briefcase is concerned, but it's a really good moment.
Yeah, I'd say it's an important cash in, but the actual run with the briefcase is pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
So they used it as a good device. So it's a more than suitable way to use the Money in the Bank. I have no issue with them giving it to Orton and using it in this way, but it means that you're basically out of the briefcase at that point because the other one's on Sandow. And I'm one of the few people in the kind of thing that I think they gave the briefcase to Sandow with the intention that Sandow was going to lose.
Just to do that for the first time?
I don't think they ever had plans to give Sandow the world title. I thought it's the opportunity to say, oh, we've made it to the point where basically everyone who wins Money in the Bank is going to win the title. So we have to have someone lose the cash in. And Sandow was a good fit for that because he's this super obnoxious, highly intelligent guy and stuff like that. And so he thinks that, oh, my odds of winning the title are 100%. And if he's the one that loses, just could have his world shatter around him. They could have told a good story off the back of it, but as we've noted, they clearly didn't. But I think the intention all along was Sandow was never going to win the title.
It could have been the case that they just decided, let's make him the type of person people will be happy to see fail. Because they were also very much into that mentality of, No. You're cheering John Cena. You just boo him just because you want to be against us, but you really, really like him. So if we have John Cena beat somebody up, you really like it. You just don't want to admit it, type of a thing. And this is past the, Zack Ryder is super popular, so let's just have him team up with John Cena, then transition all the heat over to John Cena, and it doesn't work. So then clearly that doesn't work because of Zack Ryder.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of, where they're making excuses for those things. And they convince themselves of a lot of these things too, because they have Sandow lose constantly, and then suddenly comes around to where it's like, oh, well, that guy's a loser, and it's like, yeah, because you booked him to be a loser, like you.
And then
you fake it till you make it, type of a thing, and then perception comes reality.
And then honestly, he becomes the low loser, which isn't a great gimmick, and I hate when people act like it is. But he does the Mizdow stuff, and yeah, Sandow was DOA after this.
Mizdow stuff ended up being pretty great, but not something that they could sustain and make a world championship kind of thing. But after
Let's talk about one where they could.
After that, we get Seth Rollins, and he holds it for 273 days, and he breaks another part of the barrier for this and sets another rule. You can not only cash in at WrestleMania, you can cash in during a match, which had never been done before. Everything else had been done after a match or before a match had taken place or to set up a match. Nobody had ever cashed in mid-match before. And Rollins has easily one of the best cash-ins. I mean, the guy ends WrestleMania's main event throwing the championship around of just like, ha, fuck you, I won. Now, there's lots of problems when it comes to the way that they booked Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar and the different things to that. I've talked about it ad nauseum. You know my opinions. But if we ignore that and we talk about Rollins is a fantastic Mr. Money in the Bank.
This is a great story. He turns on the Shield. He gets the briefcase with the help of Kane because now he's in the authority and he is the favored son. That stuff leading up to it is great. He gets to cash in at Mania because this is one instance where the people won't mind about the get out of jail free card because we booked ourselves into a hole with Reigns and Lesnar. And it's everything about this is perfect and a great use of Money in the Bank. And Rollins has been a main eventer ever since. So this was a Money in the Bank that worked. Thumbs up all the way.
Yeah, he was a very good Money in the Bank winner. He was a Money in the Bank winner that actually protected and invested story into because he was part of the authority. So that meant that they had some agency to actually just continually push him. He has the really good feud with Dean Ambrose throughout 2014. And so they get to feud with each other. That has some really good moments. He continues to be part of the authority against Cena and all that stuff. They already positioned him in a main event role where they've had that excellent match between him, Cena, and Lesnar at Royal Rumble, which is the only good thing about that Royal Rumble. And then they had the big cash in. Like he has, I think, definitively the greatest cash in of all time. Like it's just so memorable. Like anybody who watched that moment remembers that moment.
The only thing I don't like about it, and this is clearly nitpicky, but he's a heel and the whole place is going nuts and he's like, this is a celebratory moment, even though you're supposed to be like, that damn Rollins.
Well, that's your fault when you make your top baby face the most unlikable person in the entire company.
Which is where you go right back to something we've covered a lot here. They have done it with their own booking decisions, but this is a fantastic cash in, and not only in the maybe pile, I'd say this is really close to. Definitely got to put a pin in. He might be on there.
I think he is one of the almost guarantees.
Yeah, he's definitely high up there. But I will say the one caveat on Seth Rollins' thing is that his world championship reign, while long, is the complete antithesis of what he was as Mr. Money in the Bank. In the fact that his entire run as WWE champion is a guy who can't win on his own.
That's something that through the years, I think, has hurt a lot of people. Like, Edge has a lot of those reigns, where it's just he can't win a single match on his own. And I agree with you. in that regard.
I don't mind heels having that sort of reign, but you can't sustain that. You can't sustain that reign for 9 months because people are going to get sick of it really quickly. And
unfortunately, you don't.
Rollins. Realistically, one of the best things to happen to him is that he got injured in the middle of that title reign.
Yeah. Because I was going to say, you don't even get to the payoff where it would have been Survivor Series. Okay, Roman's done it. Roman's beaten Seth Rollins and is finally the guy because Rollins gets injured.
So instead, in 2015, we don't have, the double people winning anymore. And, we didn't in 2014 either, but Sheamus ends up getting it. And this one, it serves some purposes, and
it serves the purpose. It's the literal best example of the get out of jail free card I can think of. They are not prepared for anything coming their way for WrestleMania 32. And hey, we need a heel. They have Sheamus. Sheamus does it. Sheamus is so effective as a heel, probably just because people are sick of him at this point, that he gets Roman Reigns cheered when Roman Reigns eventually wins the belt from him on an episode of Raw. But I don't like this.
I don't like this one at all. This one's just kind of nothing to me. That's not a slight on Sheamus either. That's just the things just, fizzled.
I personally think this was a good Money in the Bank run because, and I can definitively remember a lot of watching at this point in time, there was not a single moment that when Sheamus was holding the briefcase that you didn't know that Sheamus was holding the briefcase. He made it a point to basically, he attempted cash-ins a lot. He was always holding it. He was always talking about how he's going to be cashing in and stuff like that. He made the briefcase feel like it was an actual big deal. And the big cash-in, I think, is it's one of those weirdly, it's one of those weird moments in history where something happened that a lot of people didn't like, and then something happened that people didn't like as well, and they didn't know how to feel about either thing, because it's like, oh my god, it's great that Roman Reigns just immediately lost the title because we didn't want him to win over Ambrose, but now Sheamus is holding it, and we don't want Sheamus to be holding it as well, so it's like an overwhelming sway of negativity coming across that moment, and it does eventually get Roman Reigns to be over for about a week or two, and then obviously they ruin that because he can't wrestle in a Royal Rumble for that long. He needs to be taken away because that's what gets babyfaces over. But yeah, I feel like I thought Sheamus as a Money in the Bank holder was good. I just think that he, at that point in his career, nobody wanted to really see Sheamus. So it was bad timing, but I feel like when he was given that role, he grabbed it with both hands and did the best that he could with it.
After that is Dean Ambrose, who holds it for about an hour, and we get this weird situation where at Money in the Bank, the belt switches from all 3 members of the Shield, which is fun. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's a Money in the Bank Mount Rushmore type of scenario, but it was cool.
It's a cool moment. It's a nice little footnote in history, but that's kind of where it ends, really.
Yeah, I like the Kane one much better.
Yeah, not gonna go any further than that.
So I love the Shield moment. I think the Shield moment is one of the most fun moments in modern WWE history, but I'm gonna say no to the Mount Rushmore.
We got our first women's Money in the Bank winner. The Ms. Money in the Bank is Carmella, who wins it because James Ellsworth helps her, and then they decide to run it back and to do it again on SmackDown and have Carmella win it again. And what? The whole thing was stupid. I don't like that they constitute that as a second win. It seems like it was just done to be like, let's pop a rating for SmackDown kind of a thing. But Carmella makes the best out of it that she can. You know, she gets some heat from it. She starts wearing gear that's all like, you know, money print and everything. I don't think she's bad.
I think she was a great Money in the Bank holder.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think as a Money in the Bank holder, I think she's one of the best.
She makes it part of her gimmick. She tries to cash in.
Yeah, like she takes the Money in the Bank briefcase and makes it her identity.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Miz Money in the Bank, the Miller is Money, all that stuff. It all resonates from this entire moment. The issue at this point in time, at least for me, is the fact that I think she did excellently with the briefcase character. It's just that I don't think that she was credible enough to hold the briefcase. It's one of those weird things where she is so good as a character, and she took this opportunity that was given and she made it amazing. And I think that she should get a lot of credit for just the run that she had with that briefcase. It really cemented the idea of like, well, this is the first woman holding the briefcase. How are they going to treat it? And it's like, okay, this is setting a really good foundation, which they have never followed up on. But I think that it was the point where when she does win the briefcase, you don't feel fulfilled because, and I was definitely vocal about this, and I still stick to it. She wasn't a good wrestler at that point. I think she's a lot better than she was at that point now. But at that point, you just look at her and just feel like, no, it felt like a Miz cash-in. It's just like, it's someone who gets a lot of airtime and is a really good talker and is a good character, but I just don't buy you being at that level in the ring.
And I would argue the point that was probably the exact reason they gave it to her. Because they could just be like, yeah, well, you know, everybody else, the horsewoman can wrestle, but like she's got the briefcase and, you know, she's a great character. And that's probably why they gave it to her. But I agree. The follow-up wasn't great, especially because they kept having her beat Asuka. And it's just like, fuck. But Money in the Bank run is great. The 2 ladder matches were really good, especially the one on SmackDown. And thumbs up for me. Like, obviously, if we had if we had to talk about a woman, she'd be the one that's getting the thumbs up, because the other 2 had
the other 3
nothing ran. Oh, the other 3 had nothing ran.
Baron Corbin is the thumbs down.
Oh my god. Ugh.
How do you take a guy that's a big guy on the roster, and he has at this point shown that there's some potential and that you could do potentially something with him, and then you just make him lose? Because that'll help, you know? Like, it's just, he holds it for 60 days, 58 to be specific, and it's completely pointless.
It doesn't help who beat him either. I like Jinder, but come on. At this point, everybody's like, Jinder's champion, and then you're going to have a Cena cost Corbin the match, so it's going to be cool that, you know, Cena's the opening match of SummerSlam, because they were really into this whole era for a couple of years with John, where it was like, hey, you know, I'm earning my position, and I'm not in the main event all the time, blah, blah, blah. And then fucking Cena just leaves. He just goes to Raw to feud with Roman. And Baron Corbin's left with his thumb up his ass, and he hasn't recovered from it since.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely high up there in the list of worst cash-ins of all time. Because not only he fails to cash in on, in many people's eyes, like one of the worst WWE champions in history, in Jinder Mahal, a guy who was a definitive jobber, but he loses it because he's too busy trying to punk out John Cena outside the ring. And gets rolled up like a bitch.
Yep.
And it's just, yeah, he got punked out, and I don't think his credibility has ever really reached a certain level ever since then. Especially due to the fact that like he then proceeds into a feud with Cena, which he loses.
Yep.
So it's just like, okay, this guy is always going to be at a certain level, and ever since then they started, well, the only way we can really wash away the stink of what happened here is making him a maitre d'.
And then, yeah, he gets kind of like that Miz Carmella stuff going on where they go, oh, wow, he can actually be a really good, annoying character. Let's run with that. It's just like, I just wanted a badass.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the few dudes who's legitimately big. I just want a badass.
Yeah, and this is like, this is not Baron Corbin the way that he is now. This is Baron Corbin when he was just wrecking people. And he had won the Under the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, and he could have been like some, big kind of guy, but didn't work out. Alexa Bliss only holds it for about 3 hours. She wins it at Money in the Bank, and she ends up cashing it in very quickly. Of course, it's 2 hours and 52 minutes. And, no, it's not Mount Rushmore for me.
I think I remember the podcast going into this where I think I had put all my money on Charlotte, and Callum just goes, "What are you talking about? Bliss is right there." And sure enough, Callum was right. Bliss gets the win and beats Nia Jax, and that was a great way to get out of that. Because again, get a jail free card for Money in the Bank. But it leads to Ronda winning, which is probably a cool moment for WWE, but not a Mount Rushmore in any way.
Yeah, definitely not Mount Rushmore. It's one of those weird moments in history where we now have the Charlotte Flair rules. It's like if Charlotte's in the match, you can't really bet against her. Yeah. At this point in history, it was like, well, if Bliss is in the match, you can't bet against her because they loved giving belts to Bliss at that point in time.
They still do. I mean, they gave a whole gimmick to Bliss.
Yeah,
this is currently my number one rank to win this year. So she's not the one that I would pick, but she's the number one that I'm like, it's probably going to be Bliss. I love Bliss, so it sounds kind of, but that's.
I had my like I was completely 100% fixed on the fact that Doudrop's going to win the Money in the Bank. I literally thought Doudrop's going to win the Money in the Bank and give it to Eva, and then she's going to cash in on Eva's behalf, and Eva's going to become the women's champion. That was just I'd had the whole storyline planned out in my head for that, and then it's just like, no, apparently they don't like each other anymore already.
Oh yeah, immediately the whole thing's God. We'll talk about that a little bit on the hot takes. This is fucking stupid as hell.
But Bliss's run as champion was somewhat important because it made the transition onto Ronda.
Yeah,
so it served a purpose, but it's definitely not Mount Rushmore material.
Because they couldn't just beat Nia Jax.
Oh, can we talk about another really awful cash-in?
Oh yes,
Braun Strowman's.
Oh
yeah, fucking hell! This is one of like you talk about the other ones. At least the other ones had kind of moments involved in this. This is just a damp squib of a Money in the Bank reign. It's a guy who is a big deal and he wins it and he's a popular dude and everything like that. And they decide that he's going to cash it in. He says he's going to cash it in at SummerSlam and he gets beaten the fuck up by Brock Lesnar. Just like sit down, boy. I'm going to lose this title to this guy instead. And then they decide, okay, it's a great chance to now just turn him heel because Roman's the babyface now and he's holding the title. So let's turn this guy heel, have him go after him at Hell in a Cell and have essentially he's the first guy to essentially lose his cash in on a no contest.
It's so bad too because it's just there's no purpose for it other than kind of like the way I took it. If you go back and you listen to the podcasts and stuff, I'm sure I say this, but I took it as like they did it to make themselves laugh at the people that are going to be pissed about it.
Yeah, this was firmly in that era of
spite.
Crown Jewel sucked because they had something with Strowman, but never mind any of that. I'm not gonna belabor that. I just want to talk about Brock Lesnar fucked him up with his own briefcase, chucked it up the ramp, and then probably lost the belt to Roman. That's what a fucking run that is.
And then the very next night on Raw, you have like this big moment where Braun Strowman says that like either he is going to cash in or something like that and come down, and then the Shield beat him the fuck up, just put him through a table, and we're supposed to cheer those guys even though they just beat up this other dude 3-on-1 who we're supposed to at least at this point in time think he's a babyface, and so now he aligns himself with Ziggler and McIntyre in one of the first of many like thrown together trios that's purpose in life to pull the Shield. Yeah,
you got the McIntyre and Lashley and Corbin thing down the line and stuff too. Like, this is just shit. It's one of the worst, and it's like for a guy that likes Braun Strowman as much as I do, I'm like, damn it, that's even worse. You know?
I mean, actually, just thinking about it, like, there's really no moment of this entire run with him as the briefcase. The only moment is in the match himself where he basically kills Kevin Owens, but he was in a feud where every single week he was killing Kevin Owens at this point. So it's kind of
which led to Kevin Owens quitting and then not quitting.
Yeah, so it's just a case of I really think that there's no definitive moment in this entire run of him other than him getting beaten up with the briefcase with Brock Lesnar. At least with all the other ones, there's at least something that really resonates in the brain. Like this is just such a this is the first, I don't say the first waste of it, but it just felt like what was the point almost.
2018 is the year that they apologized that the product was bad, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it was all Corbin's fault.
Yep.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy to think? That was 2018.
That's 4 years. That's 3 years ago.
3 years from them saying, we know things have been bad for a while and we apologize and we're going to turn things around. And things have only gotten worse in some ways in the past 3 years, which is just another story. Another day.
But like, let's talk about some of the names that are in that ladder match. There's Bobby Roode, who has had a weird babyface run thus far, but could have been the guy. There's Balor, who I don't understand how they've missed with him every single time. Owens can almost be the same thing. There's Rusev, who I think was starting to do the Rusev Day thing, and he's super hot.
Samoa Joe's top guy. All you have to do is pull the trigger.
And this is the part where like, the Miz should have cashed in on Daniel Bryan and then a shit bag, and they didn't do it because they did this.
Waste.
Awful.
We get Bayley next. She holds it for an hour and 20 minutes because they just want to do the surprise cash-in thing. And this is one of these weird things where, technically speaking, Bayley doesn't hold it for a full year after that when she wins the title because they had to give it to Charlotte for 4 days or 5 days or whatever it was. But Bayley kicks off what is essentially a 1.5 year long title reign with this. But it's just kind of a thing. Like, for a Mount Rushmore of Money in the Bank, I don't think it factors in because it's more so Mount Rushmore of SmackDown Women's Champions or Mount Rushmore of what, like other kind of things like that, but not Money in the Bank.
This is her CM Punk Money in the Bank 2011 win, where he wins the belt and doesn't hold it for 434 days, even though all those things are kind of conflated into one. That's kind of how it is for Bayley, where it's like she does have that 5-day layoff where she cuts her hair and all that, but it's all kind of seen as one thing. But this doesn't mean much for Money in the Bank.
Yeah, it's just for the second straight year, the women's one is immediately cashed in on because, we've already sold all our Becky 2 belts merchandise, so we don't need to have her hold the. It feels a bit like we can't actually think of a way for her to hold both belts for longer than a month, so we're going to give it to Charlotte, but then have Charlotte immediately drop it to Bayley. So, yeah, that's...
Because we got to get Charlotte one step closer to 15.
Mm-hmm. And then that way, people will get a big surprise, shocking cash in. They'll be happy. Bayley wins. They'll be happy. We have a baby face, but it's not Becky, so she doesn't have to do the double travel. And it was very functional, but that doesn't mean that it's good. Or at least not Mount Rushmore good.
I think it ended up being good, but not Mount Rushmore.
Brock Lesnar's the other one that year. And Brock has for 56 days, and he has one very, very good thing about it. Boombox Brock is fucking great.
It's one of the greatest things that he's ever done in terms of just being a character. Like he's an awesome wrestler and he's had awesome matches, but then just that one moment, it's that and the mariachi band is like those sort of things where you just go, wow, this guy is a lot of fun.
Now, if we did Mount Rushmore of Money in the Bank briefcases, Boombox probably number
Brock
one.
Lesnar, there's so much fun shit here. Not the least of which being he wasn't in the match. They just hit his music. That's the best shit. He wasn't in this match at all. They just hit the man's music. And he wins. And they let it stick.
And it makes it seem like Mustafa Ali is going to win, and it ends up being Brock. And it's just...
And there's no hint at Brock Lesnar at this point. He had lost to Rollins and kind of went away. I think he was doing the whole I'm going to go back to UFC thing. But he just steals the briefcase and comes out the next night and uses it as a boombox. Amazing.
I think there was. I thought there was so much potential with this briefcase holding, because it's literally just a guy who could kill you at any moment. He's holding the briefcase, and if you stretched it out for long enough, then it's just a case of and just told the story that Brock just doesn't want to turn up or anything along those lines, because that's what Brock does.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually he's just there, one episode of Raw or SmackDown or one pay-per-view, and he just comes in. It doesn't matter if the guy. I would love it if it was just a case of the guy has a match coming up, like either Kofi or Seth or whoever is the world champion at that point in time has a match coming up, and Brock beats him before the match can take place.
Yeah,
and then
just
beats the guy who he takes on
first.
afterwards. Yeah, and then beats the guy that he was supposed to be facing afterwards. I just feel like that would be just such a great way for Lesnar to show himself. But it's so wasted, because it's just okay, we'll have him hold it for 2 months and then he's just going to cash in on Seth, and then Seth's going to beat him straight afterwards.
Yeah, they really dropped the ball with this, because I mean, at the time, if you go back and you check out the things, I'm of course partially just really upset because I'm just kind of God damn it, they're going to put it on Brock again, and it's going to hold it for another year and whatever. But I kept saying for a while, until of course he cashed it in, I was like, you know what though, maybe they're going to have him wait until October and he's going to cash in on the first SmackDown on Fox,
which is what he should have done.
He ended up doing a different thing in the same fashion anyway and beat Kofi Kingston. But this is the type of thing where it's the boombox thing is great, all the rest of it is just wasted opportunity.
And I think they didn't do that because there were so many people who could see right through it and go, all right, for SmackDown on Fox, Kofi's dead. And that ended up happening, but they felt the need to give Seth another win, which, by the way, kind of led to this whole Messiah downfall, because people turned on him because now they don't like him because he's the babyface that wins everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the one big mistake here was that Baron Corbin in the match before Brock cashes in hits Becky with the end of days. Brock Lesnar could have F5 Becky Lynch, and that would have even made it even better. Just there's so much.
He cashes in on Becky. It's
there's so much you can do with Brock, and sometimes they just get lazy. But thumbs up for Boombox Brock all the way.
Just again, just fantasy booking in my mind. Just wouldn't you think it would be amazing if he did the thing where he takes out Becky as well as Seth, then he stacks them on top of each other, pins both of them, takes the Universal Championship, and gives the Raw Women's Championship to Sable.
Would have been great.
At least would have been something. So, following year after that, 2020, we have both the men's and the women's happen at the same time in a friggin' garbage match that's just stupid and I hate it, where Asuka and Otis win. And Asuka, the night afterward on Monday Night Raw, she is considering cashing in for the championship, and we get this weird set of notices about things where it's she's gonna cash in and it's gonna be this and it's gonna be that, and it's revealed that she does technically cash in, but she's given the championship because Becky Lynch is pregnant, and that's not happening for a match. She's the new champion now, and it's a great moment. It sucks that it's not in front of fans, because man, how cool would that have been? But Asuka wins this kind of by default. Not at all, I'm sure, what their plans were a month prior. But unfortunately for Asuka, she spends an entire year where they don't give a shit that she's champion. They book Lacey Evans and Zelina Vega, and they bring over Bayley and Sasha Banks from SmackDown over to Raw, because they clearly feel like Asuka does not have the staying power to be a draw as champion. Everybody is the bigger priority over her. Lana getting slammed through tables by Nia Jax is a bigger story than Asuka being champion. So it's not Asuka's fault.
But that's why when Rhea Ripley beat her, at Mania. It was like, okay, at least this is over now.
It's a mercy kill, kind of.
Yeah.
And then, of course, now they've been screwing up Bria, so...
I'm looking at Wikipedia just as like a refresher for how fucking weird 2020 was. It says she held the contract for 25 days because that match was taped a month in advance of it actually taking place, which is incredible.
So nuts.
You know, but Becky, this is a big moment because it just came out of nowhere. Like, hey, Becky's pregnant, Asuka's champion. And yeah, we got the year that we got. It's still not the worst thing that happened with Money in the Bank because Otis had it.
Otis wins at the same time. He holds it for over 160 days, 193 technically, but 168 according to the WWE recognization. And they give it to him as a joke, and everybody can see through it, just fully transparent. Everybody's like, you gave it to him because you thought it's funny. And there's plenty of podcasts where we're talking about it, where we're like, he's not going to win. There's no way he wins the world championship. And he doesn't even get a chance to cash in because they take about 2 weeks where he goes, hey, maybe I'll cash in and I'm just going to kind of do my thing and I'm going to, rub my belly. And then he disappears. And for a couple of months, they kill all of his momentum to the point where he eventually feuds with The Miz and loses the contract because Tucker turns on him. And they don't even bother to do a Tucker and Otis feud. They separate the two, different brands. Tucker eventually gets fired. Miz wins the championship eventually after a while as a complete screw job just for the sake to get it onto Bobby Lashley. This 2020 may be the worst overall year for Money in the Bank.
Hold on, and then you got to throw in there that Miz cashed in at TLC, lost.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he did technically. Yeah.
And then they retconned that. They go, "Oh, Morrison did it for you. So sorry. Here you go."
I don't dislike that as much as some of the other things, but it is kind of just another
I think
extra.
It's the whole package, though.
Yeah.
Like that is why I am saying I don't know who's going to win this year. We don't know everybody that's in there yet. But they've got to have a good run, man, because this briefcase is dead. This sucks. None of these are on the Mount Rushmore.
No.
Yeah, these two aren't the Mount Rushmore because Asuka, I don't know whether everyone classed like Asuka's win as the Money in the Bank win because realistically it was a match for the Raw Women's Championship.
We just didn't know it.
Yeah, because the title was in the briefcase. So it was like, I guess it's a blend of like she won both Money in the Bank and the Raw Women's Championship at the same time. So she's realistically, she's the only ever Money in the Bank holder outside of Kennedy, obviously, but he lost the briefcase and Otis, obviously, because they lost the briefcase. But the one who still held the briefcase but never actually cashed in.
Yeah, it's
still
weird.
Won the title. Just like this again, it's really. At least they did something different, I guess, but it's just like it's a really weird circumstance. And Otis, it was just like, Otis makes Vince laugh. So he's going to do that, and they have absolutely no idea where to do it, but he still makes Vince laugh, and then he stops making Vince laugh, and so, why the fuck are we giving this guy the briefcase? It's like, I'll put it on the Miz and see what he does with it. And with Miz, it's like, it's several years too late for him to hold the title. Like, his eventual run as WWE Championship serves a purpose in transitioning from Drew to Bobby and then launching like a 3-month feud between Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre. But I just don't feel like I feel like you might as well have done that with someone at least different.
I do want to say this for The Miz. The episode of Raw that is entirely centered around Miz versus Bobby Lashley is one of the most cohesive stories, just in a vacuum, ever told on WWE TV. You don't need to have watched it for years to know this guy's champion, this dude who's an actual athlete is going to kill him, and he's trying to avoid that. And eventually, when he can't run away anymore, Lashley beats him in like 30 seconds. Fantastic.
There's two things that, and there's probably more if I can think of it, two off the top of my head, though, that they haven't done yet with Money in the Bank that I really wish that they would do. One of them being when they had this whole switch with Otis and the Miz one, I thought that they were going to pull the trigger potentially on this, where it just keeps getting passed around. Like, Miz could have lost it to somebody else, and then that person could have lost it to somebody else, and we could have had like 5 Mr. Money in the Banks. I don't think it's something that you can really do unless it ends up being just like, hey, this is kind of how this is working. But there's also a thing that I was hoping could potentially happen with The Miz, where he was getting, like, relatively speaking, I mean, Money in the Bank happened in, May, right? May 2020? May 11th.
Yeah, May.
Is when, Asuka won the championship. So yeah, early May, Miz ends up cashing in and winning this belt and doing all this kind of stuff after Elimination Chamber. So there's not that much time between the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view and Money in the Bank pay-per-view if they would have done that the way that it was. I was kind of hoping that they would have done a story, which I think it still do, but it's kind of harder now, where Miz didn't get a chance to cash in until Money in the Bank. And they could have done a thing where he tries to argue, no, I've only been Mr. Money in the Bank since October. I've got until October. And they go, no, the Money in the Bank contract is from Money in the Bank to Money in the Bank. You are running out of time. You have to cash in. And then you could tell a story with somebody like The Miz, because Miz is a perfect character to do this, because he's a weasel heel and he's somebody who can lose and stuff, of him trying desperately to cash in because he's running out of time. And every time he tries to cash in, it's like, whether it's McIntyre or if it's somebody else, I know, whoever, it doesn't really matter. But like, he tries to cash in and then it's like, it's not the right time and all that. No, I don't cash in. Maybe next week. Fuck, I'm running out of time. That kind of a thing. I think that would have been kind of cool. But, no, still haven't gotten that yet.
Yeah, they really need to do the whole, hey, you're running out of time. Because that would be a great one. Somebody cashing in at Mania, like properly just saying, nope, I'm in this WrestleMania main event because I want a main event Mania, would be a really cool one. Somebody just, like you said, getting it tossed around, and then you can factor in okay, it's got tossed around all these different times. Now you have like 24 hours to cash in. You can still do fun stuff with this briefcase, but they're lazy with it. It's a get out of jail free card for them, and they don't care. Oh, Riddle. I heard Riddle say this shit on Raw Talk where he's like, I could technically use it for the Intercontinental title or the tag. I don't start doing that shit. That's a bad precedent to set, because then you can just say, well, we don't even have to put it on a main eventer.
I wouldn't mind them doing that if there's a proper story to tell, where they could just say you could challenge for any championship, but I don't think that they should just do it.
It's too slippery of a slope.
I don't trust them to not go down a bad road. But there is potential, like that could have been something like The Miz could have done at some point and been like, I want that Intercontinental Championship back. That's my title, that kind of thing. But they didn't. So ultimately, we're down to, if we're looking at the Mount Rushmore types, we've got about like 10 options that we had ran through. We're locking in Edge, right?
Locking in Edge, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think locking in Punk. Like,
I feel like we're locking in Rollins, potentially.
I'd go with Rollins, yeah.
All right, then. I mean, if both of you are saying it, my thing doesn't matter, but I'd lock him in.
With Punk, he's definitely in the running. The other people that we have kind of in that maybe pile are to varying degrees. We've got Punk, we've got Kane, The Miz, Daniel Bryan, Dolph Ziggler, Carmella, Randy Orton, and Rob Van Dam. I think that's it. That's not in alphabetical order. I thought I had an alphabetical order, not even close. Kane's above Bryan, and okay, whatever.
So I'm gonna rule out Randy Orton because it's cool. As much as it sets the stage for something big, it's not a memorable cash-in. It's just sort of to add to the resume. I'm gonna rule out Carmella for me because it's a good cash-in, but I don't know if it stands in the pantheon of Money in the Bank. At least those two ruled out.
Just to give you guys a better idea, I'm going to send this to you guys in Skype so you can see the full list. Easier than me just saying it out loud.
Yeah, I would. So from this list, for me, it's Punk and Ziggler.
I think I would lean towards. Oh man, that's kind of tough. I think I would take. Fuck. Every time I look at this, I go, what? There's three.
Punk and Bryan.
Punk and Bryan?
Yep.
And you were saying Punk and Ziggler?
You know what?
Is that what you were saying, Rob? Punk and Ziggler?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. But
so I'm cool with Punk.
Bryan.
I'm cool with Punk being there for all three of us. If you guys go for two, then that's already two. But I'm cool with making Punk a 3.
Hold on. So you're saying Bryan because it launched everything?
I think it's a better run it's a more memorable run with the briefcase than Ziggler's one is.
See, I think if we're just talking runs with the briefcase, Ziggler has it. But there is the.
I don't remember. And again, I was watching all of this thing. I don't remember anything that Ziggler did with the briefcase.
The only thing I remember
quite a lot of what Bryan did. So.
The only thing I remember about Bryan is that he was losing all the time, and then Big Show was trying to get him to break his word.
Was Ziggler pushed at this point?
Yeah,
It wasn't. No, it wasn't really. Was he?
This is the part where Jericho loses to him at SummerSlam. He's got a few matches for the world title, even though he's got the briefcase against Sheamus. He was kind of this in-between guy because they kept doing Sheamus and Del Rio, and he was the third wheel to that. But he was pushed more than Bryan was when Bryan had the briefcase.
So I would lean more towards either The Miz or maybe a case, oddly enough, and it's not a strong case, I'll admit it, but maybe a case for Kane. Because I do kind of want to factor in cash-in types and different things too. Kane is immediately won the championship type of thing. He is somebody who you give him a world championship reign. That's a solid world championship reign afterward, and you bump him up to a level that he hadn't quite been at before. And he's an established name that wins it, and it's not in a bad way. Kind of like when Cena wins it, people are like, fuck, what the hell? But when Kane wins it, people are like, it's pretty cool. Kane finally got that. So it's a positive kind of all the way around. And I put The Miz in the ranking potentially as he's got a fun cash-in similar to Ziggler. Not as big of a moment as Ziggler, but we got the Angry Miz Girl and stuff. And I think that The Miz plays the Weasel character well. I think overall The Miz has a better run with the Money in the Bank afterward, as champion, than Ziggler does just because of the injury. So I'd put Miz over Ziggler. I'd put Ziggler over Bryan. And then it's mostly a matter of the Kane thing for me. I think I'd lean more towards Miz being my number 4. He also is a guy who won it twice, and he's successful in cashing in both times.
Well, I'll just go through my thought process right now. So my fourth pick is Bryan because I feel like he had a fun, especially closing run with the briefcase. And I feel like he was someone who was out of left field, so a lot of people didn't expect it, and it was a feel-good moment at that point. And then he transitions from the briefcase into having a really stellar career. From a career that was kind of, people wanted to see him do well, but was kind of floundering on the main roster because they just didn't seem to have any plans for him. He basically used this opportunity and launched a great career off the back of it. And so I feel like this is a big catalyst for it. So I think it's more important. Him holding the briefcase is more important to him than it is for any of the other people on this list. I would say that after that, I would go Rob Van Dam, because if we're talking about different cash-ins, his one was a very different cash-in, and he also fits into the camp of someone who, okay, it's cool that he's a guy who we always wanted to reach that world championship level, but was always kind of held back, or there was a reason why he never achieved that level. The thing that would hold him back is the fact that his reign afterwards isn't very good. So if I was to go with all the rest of them and just go in order, it would be Bryan, RVD, then probably Ziggler, then I'd probably go Carmella, then Miz, then Kane.
So I guess let's go one by one here with this. And with mine, I've got Miz, Kane, Ziggler, Bryan. I think we can rest assured Randy Orton's not. And
we already ruled him out.
Yeah, and Carmella, I think we all eventually would agree to somebody else over Carmella. I'm definitely not voting Rob Van Dam in my fourth over Miz, Kane, Ziggler, and Bryan. So if that were to be like, Callum goes with Bryan, I'd pick Bryan over RVD. If Rob goes with Ziggler, I'd pick Ziggler over RVD. So RVD's kind of out of there. Probably most likely not a case for Kane, right?
No.
So it's pretty much down to Miz, Ziggler, and Bryan.
You want Miz.
I
Rob
want Miz.
Ziggler. And I want Bryan.
It's those three.
and realistically, it's just a point of like, I'm not going to be happy with one of the other two going in. And it's one of those points where I will accept the result, but I will never agree with the result if one of the other two goes in over Bryan.
Well, the diplomatic way to do this is always, if you can't pick your guy, who are you picking? So, like, if I have to pick between Ziggler and Bryan, now, if Callum has to pick between Ziggler and Miz, you're going Ziggler.
Yeah. I know if you're picking out Ziggler and Bryan, you're going Ziggler as well.
And Rob, if you're picking Miz and Bryan,
I'm going Miz.
So mathematically, it leans more towards Ziggler, even though Rob would pick.
If we're going to put Ziggler in, tell me one thing he did with the briefcase other than that one match with John Cena and the cash in. Tell me one thing, and I will let you go in for it.
He used it to help him beat Jericho.
Okay, look, fine. You gave me that one thing. I did say that thing. So look, I told you that one thing. Like, if you could tell me that moment, then that's fine. That's like, I'm a man of my word. So Ziggler goes in.
And it is something that it's worth talking about, how that was one of the biggest pops.
I think either way, this discussion really goes from, wow, these guys are solid because look at the booking here, to, well, there's a debate here between these three, to look at all these no's.
Yeah, it's kind of. But let's talk about the no's real quick. It's not going to be a big long discussion. This has already gone longer than I expected that it would. But our potentials for the worst, we've got. If I'm balancing this out correctly, I don't think that we had Sheamus, Ambrose, Bliss, Bayley, Lesnar, Asuka, Otis might be on the worst. It kind of seems like this is not in any kind of order. It's all jambled. Kennedy, Swagger, Cena, Sandow, Corbin, Strowman, and Otis.
I'll give you my four. It's Swagger, Strowman, Otis, and Cena.
So this
no, not Cena. Sandow. Sandow.
This is the list that we're working with. We're working with 7 names. Unless anybody wants to make the argument for like Del Rio being worse or something like that. But that's just a different story, I think. I kind of think Sandow's a guarantee for worst. Cena is pretty much a guarantee for worst. Then it's kind of tough because it's like, I wouldn't put Swagger down for worst over Corbin, Strowman, and Otis. And then I don't know if I'd put Kennedy down for worse over Corbin, Strowman, and Otis, because I kind of don't blame Kennedy a little bit, like his injury gets in the way, whereas like Otis is just a complete failure for it. I don't blame Otis for that either. It's, creative. But like, I feel more disappointed with Corbin's than I do with Kennedy's. And I feel more disappointed with Strowman's than I do with Kennedy's. And I feel more disappointed with Otis in general with this whole thing than I do Kennedy. I'd kind of go with those 5. And I'd narrow it down to 4, obviously, because that's the point.
I agree.
Would we lock in Sandow and Cena?
No.
I'd lock in Sandow.
No, I'd lock in Cena.
Well, yeah, we could potentially lock in this.
No, but I wouldn't lock in Sandow. I think for me, it's Otis, Strowman, Corbin, and Cena. Because Sandow has that match with Cena.
All right, you know what? I'll accept that.
Well, none of these other ones have a definitive match. I mean, you could say that Cena has the match with Punk, but that match ends in like a fucking DQ.
If that's our group of 5, I guess let's just, for the sake of making things official, do we lock in Otis because it was a joke that led nowhere, and then he loses it, and he doesn't even get a match?
Mm-hmm.
We lock in Corbin because he loses to the worst champion ever in Rollins.
I feel confident with the Strowman, with the Corbin lock in. That really was just disappointing.
We lock in Strowman because he absolutely does nothing with the briefcase except get beaten up by Brock Lesnar with it.
Yeah,
and his cash in ends in a no contest.
And
I'd lean more towards Sandow than Cena for that other one, though.
You know what, though? McCallum is right. At least Sandow has the personalized briefcase. He has a lot of stuff. And, Cena just has it for a week just to tee-hee.
But is it more problematic that Cena has it just to set up a match versus Sandow has it and they could have done something and they wait and they beat him over and over again and then he also loses and then they don't do anything with him afterward, too? I think there's way more negatives to Sandow's.
Well, no, I'd partly say that Sandow's one is more meaningful because he does lose the briefcase. Because up to that point, nobody had really lost the briefcase. So his one is actually more meaningful than John Cena's one.
Isn't that more like infamous, though?
Well, but it does prove that the briefcase isn't infallible. You
needed at some point. You needed someone to fail the cash in, and like to properly fail the cash in, because otherwise it's just a device that you just like. Okay, you're essentially crowning a new world champion here. Sandow's moment gives the briefcase some element of jeopardy to it. Obviously, they've beaten it over the head too many times. It shouldn't happen like 95% of the time. The person winning it should cash in, but Sandow always given us that element of doubt now. I'd say Sandow had the personalization. He held it a lot longer and had that match with John Cena that I still remember pretty much from start to finish. Cena's one. It's the issue with the fact is that Cena never needs anything like that. It was just another thing to give to John Cena. He could have just challenged CM Punk for a match at Raw 1000.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree. Cena's was worse.
All right, well then that's 2 then for Cena. So that ends up being Otis, Corbin, Strowman, and Cena as the worst Mr. Money in the Bank winners. I like when we do the twofers. Because obviously we're not going to go back and do a whole nother discussion and be like, all right, let's break down all these all over again with the whole thing. It makes sense to just do both at the same time. And we don't have the ability to really say, like, for the Miz Money in the Bank, there's been 4 of them. So we, those 4 right now.
I'm going to just say real quick, I always love these discussions. This was a much longer discussion than I would have intended. And I'd like to thank Callum for being so spirited despite how late it is in his time zone.
Well, I didn't expect it to be both. Essentially, this is a Mount Rushmore and also a definitive history of everyone who's ever won the Money in the Bank and what happened with it. Which I think hopefully people enjoyed it and stuff like that because it's nice to go like down memory lane, that sort of thing. Maybe it just wasn't. Maybe people actually just know what these people actually did with the briefcase and stuff like that. We just have to say yes or no.
Well, I think that's why we have the discussion, because if not, then it would have just been like, all right, well then if then I pick this guy, then it's a 5-minute podcast.
Yeah, I know it's good to tell the history and stuff like that, but maybe we didn't have to spend 20 minutes talking about Rob Van Dam.
Well, I probably wouldn't have.
Well, I defended him, stuff like that. Could we just clarify the B tier is going to be, if we've got the 4 locked in, the B tier is the Miz, Rob Van Dam, Bryan and Kane, or Carmella or something.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And kind of almost definitive C tier, we have Carmella, Randy Orton. Actually, then at that point, then that's a whole other thing, so we don't need to have a C tier. But
yeah.
Yeah, all right. So I'll add that down to the list. I always add these for the wiki for anybody that's interested. These go up on there at some point. So if you want to quickly browse and not listen to previous episodes or something, then you can see a list of like top rope list type stuff. But if you want to know why we get to those kind of options, then that's why you got to listen to the podcast. But this is a much, much better. I love doing the things that are like this where you can talk previous things and not just necessarily have to be like, all right, let's do a whole podcast about Dewdrop. and Eva Marie, or a whole podcast about anything going on right now, really, for the most part. But the game plan to follow up for the next couple of episodes and stuff is still kind of up in the air, at least to a certain extent. Not really like 100% set in stone, but we do kind of have some ideas. Where next week, oddly enough, is episode number 500. So right now, the game plan is still to do what we had mentioned before, to go back to episode 16 on the show and reevaluate what the roster was like back then and see how things have played out over the past, 500 plus episodes. Where we're going to do that. We're going to look back on names that aren't on the roster anymore now, people that have retired, people that have been forced to no longer wrestle anymore, people that are wrestling for other companies, people that are still there and maybe have been better or worse. And that's just kind of a way to look back and see how things have changed over such a long time of doing this podcast. We will do a hot tags before that. That's coming up at some point this week. This is Dynamite's on Saturday night, right? So we'll probably do that on Friday night then, the way that we normally have been doing it. So that way we'll be able to talk about SmackDown and some other things. We might not. We might do it another time. Kind of depends. We'll see. It'll come up when it comes up. And if you're subscribed and you ring that notification bell, you'll know when it's up. Same thing with you following Facebook and Twitter. Same thing with you following the website. It'll come up at some point. And then the week after next, when we get to episode number 501, the current game plan for July 7th is to do the Q3 mailbag. And we are not just doing the mailbag, but we're also doing the qualifying round of the Heat of the Moment tournament. So if you have any mailbag questions that you want to send in advance, send them in now. I'll backlog them and we'll get around to them. But we're going to do that live on YouTube. So if you can join us for it, then that'd be even better. We got those things coming, and then eventually Money in the Bank is going to be happening the week after that. So there will be some other things in the mix too. I'll probably do a call the spot on the website for the people that are in Money in the Bank. We might end up, if we have the time, trying to do another fan announce table of some sort. It's a little bit harder with the Peacock stuff, but yeah, we might be able to do it. And basically, if you stay tuned and you follow what we've got going on, you got other stuff that you could be checking out too. So follow me at Tony Mango, follow the Smark Out Moment stuff, follow all the Fanboys Anonymous stuff, check out the Review to a Kill podcast and all the things that are happening over there. And follow what these guys have going on as well, mostly on the pro wrestling spectrum. But hey, you're listening to that, so you're probably into it. Rob?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at DudeRelease and check out everything I'm doing over at Fightful.com and WrestleZone.com. And just stay tuned for more fun stuff like the retro stuff I've done with Callum. Callum?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Wigmeister14. If you're interested in retro wrestling content, then there is always 2001 A Wrestling Odyssey and the Paul Heyman SmackDown podcast over on the Smark Out Moment YouTube channel and archive, so just check all that stuff out. There might be some more stuff with that coming down the pipeline, but because we like looking back at the past, because the future is not bright in general. And obviously check out all the articles on smarkoutmoment.com as well, including the power rankings, my weekly contribution, but make sure you're keeping your eyes peeled to everything that's going out on the website as well.
Who's currently winning the fantasy league, and how badly am I losing?
Actually, that's a good time to talk about that, because we are fresh off of Hell in a Cell, so things have changed in the fantasy league. So after Hell in a Cell, obviously, if people don't know it works, obviously all the rules are on the website. But at this, if you are unaware, whoever wins the pay-per-view prediction contest gets to make more changes to their roster of people than the people that lose. That's like your little bonus for getting the being good at predictions. So the winner of the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view prediction contest was Tony.
Woo.
I finished second place over Rob due to the fact that I got closer to the time for the Hell in a Cell main event than Rob did.
Damn it.
So yeah, we drew, but I got that extra little bump up for that. That meant that Tony was able to make 3 changes to his team. So he decided to drop Shayna Baszler, Saray, and Sheamus, replacing them with Finn Balor, Eva Marie, and Becky Lynch. I got 2 picks. I decided to drop both Damien Priest and Nia Jax for Kofi Kingston and Doudrop. Rob only got to make 1 change and decided to drop, just seeing on the list here, drop Jinder Mahal for Sonya Deville.
Yep, because I'm going to just abuse that whole, hey, they're on TV for 20 seconds, look what I'm doing, this gets me points.
In terms of overall standings, it is incredibly close, which is good. This is a sign that the changing format happened. Yep, because about this time last year, I was already significantly ahead of a lot of people. Me and Tony had kind of said, okay, us two are going to be fighting for the trophy, and Rob and Wago are going to be battling for last place pretty much by this point. Instead, at this point, it is remarkably close. There is only 7 points separating all 3 of us.
Shit, I thought that I was vastly behind.
You scored 60 points for Hell in a Cell.
Nice
week, so you were far behind, but you came roaring back on that one. So at the moment, Rob is in last place on 228 points. Tony's in second place with 229 points, just 1 point ahead. I am in first place on 235 points. So yeah, it's very close. This week has been a low-scoring week so far. Well, it was until NXT. So just to give a little bit of a rundown, Tony's currently on 3 points for this week. Because Riddle was the only person on his thing that's either won or appeared, pretty much.
Yeah, they really fucked me over with some of these things.
Yeah, both Drew McIntyre and Even Marie lost matches, and Wesley didn't even appear on NXT in any capacity that was really beyond just them hyping up the fact they're going to be fighting for the tag title soon. So yeah, Rob has only had 3 people appear on TV, so he hasn't really had the chance to make any points. Right. So none of his people have had a match this week so far. So
SmackDown will do some good.
I'm doing well because of both Adam Cole and Frankie Monet. So I'm currently, Tony's getting 3 points for this week. Rob's got 6. I've got 20. So planning on building up the lead as long as SmackDown does me well. But yeah, that's how the Fantasy League is shaping up at the moment. So it's a very close contest. So keep on top of everything by checking out the Fantasy League page over on the Smark website.
The easiest way to get to that is just to go to WWEFantasyLeague.com. So pay attention to everything that's happening on the website and the channels and the social media accounts and everything else. Hang out, drop your comments below. Hopefully you had fun checking this out, and let us know what you'd like to see in the future, because, eventually we're going to get another blank week coming up, and we're going to factor that all in and keep things rolling. So next time around, it's going to be the hot tags, and we'll see you then, whether it's Friday afternoon, Friday night, or Saturday morning, or 20 years from now if you check this out. I don't know. Whatever it is, we'll see you next time, everybody. But this has been another Smark Out moment, and we're being counted out.